Chapter 10. Jack jolted awake. Like the day before, it took a moment to remember where he was. He checked the time, and the symbol had now turned into a green door with a green arrow pointing up toward it from below. 2 hours, 56 minutes, and 54 seconds. If he was reading it right, he had just under 3 hours to enter the tower before it closed for the day, meaning he had about an hour to kill before meeting Lex for breakfast. He checked the corners of his vision, looking for the rest bonus he was supposed to get, but didn't see anything new. Maybe it had to do with breakfast. He shrugged to himself and stood, stretching his muscles. He then re-equipped everything and opened his door. Lex's door was closed, so he headed down the stairs. When he exited into the common area, he could smell wood smoke, but he didn't see anyone around. Only the big blue curtain with the painted eye looking out over the empty tables and chairs. He walked across the stone floor, opened the door, and stepped outside. The sun must have only recently come up behind the dirty gray clouds, leaving it chilly outside but tolerable. The air was still, as if the ocean hadn't woken up yet. A thin sheet of mist clung to the ground over the lush grass. The tower stood before him, stabbing into the sky. He took in a hearty lungful of crisp morning air and started to walk toward it. Jack practiced swinging his sword on the cliff overlooking the cove to kill some time. After all he had learned, Jack still didn't really know what to expect inside the mysterious tower. He also didn't completely understand what death meant for him. Actually, for all he knew, dying in this game might trigger a logout option. Still, that seemed like a last resort. He felt much more confident with the sword, though, after reminding his muscles how it felt to control it, how much it weighed, and how much strength it took to change its direction. When it was time, he walked back into the inn. Lex and Demi were already at the bar, and both turned to see who was coming in.
"Morning, ladies,"
Jack said with a smile.
"Morning, Jack,"
Demi said, waving him over.
"Come on over and get your complimentary breakfast."
She then spun behind the blue-painted curtain behind her. Jack walked across the inn and stood next to Lex. She gave him a half-smile.
Be careful in there. Remember to get out if you lose half your hit points. You can always try again tomorrow. Almost no one defeats the first floor boss solo on their first time. Watch for traps and monsters with special effects. Although you shouldn't see anything like that on the first floor. The tower is unpredictable.
Demi came back with 2 plates of what looked like sushi and placed them on the bar. It was raw fish wrapped in seaweed. He watched Lex take one off her plate with her fingers and pop it into her mouth. She looked half-lidded at Jack with a raised eyebrow while she chomped on her food. Her cheek bulged out like she really crammed a lot in there. Jack shrugged and picked up one of his own fish rolls and popped it in whole. He took a moment to contemplate and savor the salty slab of meat in his mouth.
"You are so talented,"
Jack said, looking at Demi through his own chomping.
"It's amazing what you can do with just a few ingredients."
It was like the softest, most tender fish jerky imaginable wrapped in a buttery seaweed floss that melted in his mouth.
"I've had a lot of experience with these few ingredients,"
she replied dryly. Jack and Lex finished their light meal with little conversation. It was really happening. Jack felt like he was about to take a test he really didn't know anything about. After he had swallowed the last fish roll, he noticed another status icon appear. It was a white eye on a blue square. Rest bonus, plus 10 health, plus 10 mana. Gain 1 mana per kill. Duration, exit. Start your climb off right.
Hey, wow. My health just doubled.
Mm-hmm.
Lex responded, unimpressed through her chewing. After they both had finished, they thanked Demi for breakfast and headed out of the inn. He found himself walking next to Lex, headed directly toward the impossible tower disappearing into the vibrant cobalt sky far above. Looking all the way up its length always made him feel like up flipped places with down.
Well, good luck, Jack.
She held out her hand. Black leather wrapped her tan skin to her knuckle, leaving the tips of her fingers exposed. Jack reached out and squeezed her warm hand firmly.
You too.
She held his gaze for a moment, then let go.
You go in first. I'll be right behind you.
Jack cast a glance at the door ahead of him before taking a step. The ratty wooden door had seen too many storms. He reached out his hand to grab the handle, but stopped and turned to Lex.
Did you do it on your first try alone? Beat the first boss?
She stood with her eyes on his, motionless for a few heartbeats before speaking. In the right light, her eyes were a luminous gold, but right now they seemed to dim again.
It's an irrelevant question, Jack. I'll tell you about it later. Now, get in there, and don't take any risks.
He nodded, then turned and grabbed the iron handle roughly bolted into the wood. Jack intended to yank it open, but he never got that far. A blinding flash enveloped his being, and Jack instantly found himself staring at a large crystal outcropping. He spun around, trying to figure out what just happened. The first thing to catch his attention was the sky. It was now night, but it was much different from Blackmoor Cove or anything he had seen on Earth. Actually, what it looked like was outer space. Shining nebulae of bright colors stretched across the sky above him, and a deep blue moon illuminated the massive clusters of crystals surrounding him. The dense forest of sharp crystal rose to different heights and continued as far as he could see in every direction. The ground was covered by crushed crystal gravel that looked like millions of rough-cut jewels. Bursts of light sparkled everywhere he turned his eyes. The place was dazzling. Behind him, emerging from the pulverized crystal bits, was a pedestal with an appearance similar to a stone birdbath with a white sphere resting snugly in its basin. The orb gave off a faint, throbbing glow.
Must be the exit orb,
Jack muttered. So, this is what the inside of the tower looked like. Lex was right about the possibility of it being beautiful. He reached down and picked up a stone, thinking he might have stepped into a diamond mine, but the object didn't have any info panel, and he couldn't will the clear gemstone into his inventory, so he tossed it over his shoulder. The twinkling gravel crunched beneath his boots as he carefully searched around the area for any clue about what he should do next. Approaching one of the clusters of crystals, Jack reached out his hand to touch it. It was smooth as glass, but cloudy in parts. Jack noticed black spots deep beneath the surface, slowly moving and flowing down, almost like thousands of tadpoles in a shallow puddle. Jack backed away. What he saw there made him uneasy. He found 3 paths leading through the crystals and out of the circular open patch he was standing in. Picking one at random, he started to creep forward. Clumps of crystal jutted from the ground all around him, hemming him in, and when Jack came to a fork in the path, he felt like a rat in a maze. He searched for any indication for which direction to pick, left or right. Jack froze before he reached the intersection when movement out of the corner of his eye caught his attention. It was a white ribbon fluttering in the wind, partially hidden by the 10-foot crystal wall on his right. But there was no wind. The air was still and silent. The obnoxious crunching his boots had recently been making suddenly caused Jack to feel very exposed, and he quietly pushed his back against the crystal outcropping as he kept his eye on the dancing white ribbon. The cloth fluttered around near the ground for a moment, and then moved up to hover above the path again, as if it were looking for something. He watched it for a while before deciding to get a better look. Nothing was going to get done just standing there. Jack pulled his rusty iron sword from his decorative scabbard and slowly placed one foot in front of the other, trying not to make a sound. He edged forward with careful side steps while pressed against the glassy shards on the right side of the path. As he got closer, he was able to peek around the corner and see more clearly what exactly was flapping through the air. It was a snake. A pure white, flat snake with black eyes. It was picking up bits of crystal gravel with its mouth, floating back up a few feet and then spitting them out onto the middle of the path. It reminded Jack of a goldfish he saw once doing the same thing while waiting for his fried dumplings. The strangest part was its flowing body just undulating in midair as if moving through water. A brief flash of suffocation washed over him as his brain tried to make sense of what he was seeing. Distracted by his sense of reality flatlining, Jack hadn't noticed that the snake was now facing him, slowly moving his way. He returned his focus on the creature and stepped away from the wall. It opened its tiny mouth, making an equally tiny hissing sound as it wove back and forth in the air towards him. Its long, flat body was much harder to see when it faced forward. Jack planted his feet and raised his rusty sword, ready to stand his ground. When he stopped, the snake stopped. It waved in the air for a moment before flicking its tail and darting forward. Jack saw its mouth full of needles rushing toward his face, and his arm reacted. With an awkward upward swing, he was just a bit slow and caught the snake near the end of its body. He felt his sword meet resistance and slice its underside just as it sliced open his cheek. The snake quickly zipped behind Jack, and he spun to keep the enemy in front of him. 19 out of 20 HP. He was pissed that he took damage already and wondered how much life was on the hissing, fanged creature waving in midair a few feet away. Jack decided to bring the fight to it instead of waiting. He stepped forward and swung his sword diagonally to try for the most surface area, but the creature swirled in the air and dodged the attack. The thing noticed that his overextended attack had created an opening and darted forward, quickly sinking its teeth into his shoulder before flapping back out of range.
Damn it!
Jack shouted more at himself than at the snake. 17 out of 20 HP. Jack weakly faked another attack, testing its reaction, and the snake rushed in again, rows of sharp white fangs going for his face. Jack was ready for it this time and reversed his swing right into its head. The creature screeched, and its body slowly faded away while making an electronic-sounding low hum. An object dropped onto the ground in front of Jack. He looked around to see if anything else was around, and when he was sure the coast was clear, he bent down to inspect the loot drop. It was a solid bronze sword with a wide blade and white leather wrapped around its hilt. Jack looked deeper into the weapon resting on the crushed crystal ground. Ancient Bronze Gladius, sword, value 3, damage 1, hit chance plus 0.02.
An upgrade already.
He put his sword back in his scabbard and picked up the new item, but was careful to keep his intent clear. He wasn't trying to equip it, just pick it up. Jack held it in his hand and realized he would need to unequip his current sword before he could use his new weapon. He opened his character interface and gave one more attempt to remove the scabbard in his main hand slot. The rusty sword Demi had given him was depicted as inside the sheath, and he still couldn't do anything with either. Frustrated, he put the ancient bronze gladius into his inventory and let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Equipping new items seemed to be immensely important to his current situation. Not wanting to give up, he tried moving the new sword from his inventory directly onto the main hand slot, hoping it would just replace what was already in there. Instead, another flash of light originating from the scabbard at his side sent his arm over his eyes. When he opened them and looked down, he saw a change in the sword. The hilt now had the same white leather wrapping he had seen on the gladius. He inspected the item in his weapon slot. ARV Alternus, sword, value 4 out of 10, damage 2, hit chance plus 0.02.
More!
Boomed the voice again.
Who are you?
Jack yelled into the sky, scanning it for any sense of an observer. He heard only silence and yelled again.
Answer me!
There was no response. Remembering where he was, Jack quickly looked up and down the path, checking to see if he drew more of those ribbon snakes. Fluttering in the still air were 2 of the creatures, slowly advancing on him from different sides of the crushed crystal intersection. Jack took a step back toward the exit orb, keeping his eyes locked on their movements, the gravel crunching under his feet the only sound. He slowly pulled his sword out from his permanent scabbard. The last thing he wanted to do was let Lex down, let the people of Blackmoor Cove down. Jack's growing determination was broken when he noticed that the sword he had spent hours practicing with felt different in his hand. He found the weapon was both heavier and easier to wield. He didn't have time to dwell on these changes, as both ribbon snakes began to flap their bodies faster and hiss as they got closer. Jack switched his focus from one to the other and realized that unless he did something, they were going to surround him. His boots kicked up crushed crystal as he pushed off towards the one on the right. The upgraded blade flashed out, catching the fragile creature by surprise and slicing across its white reptilian face. The attack was enough to defeat it, and the creature dissolved into nothing. Jack turned his head to locate the other snake when it sunk its needle teeth into the meat of his left palm. The stinging pain reminded him of when he fell off his bike on his asphalt driveway as a kid. The creature shook violently before letting go, and Jack swung his sword after its tail, but it flapped out of his reach. He missed but kept his balance, resettling his stance and holding the sword in front of him. He risked a look down at his empty hand and was surprised to see there was no damage, no blood, no torn flesh. Even the intense pain he had felt earlier was starting to fade. Jack snapped his head up and faked an attack when he noticed the ribbon snake was floating closer. It twisted in the still air, violently performing evasive maneuvers for an attack that never came. Jack realized he hadn't used any of his abilities yet. He lunged at the second snake, and without having to try very hard at all, Jack initiated his double strike ability. He brought his sword down in front of him at an angle, and it whiffed right under the agile ribbon snake. Then, surprising both himself and the tiny monster, Jack's arm seemed to instantly skip back in time, reappear at the start of his swing, and come back down at the same angle. The swiftly flapping creature was in a slightly different position, and his sword caught it right in the middle, cutting the thing in half. It faded to static, and a pair of boots landed on the ground below where it had been swishing in midair a moment ago.
So that's how that works,
Jack mused to himself while looking at his bronze short sword. Double strike suddenly seemed much more useful than he had initially thought. Jack spared a glance up toward his life and mana display. 15 out of 20 HP, 26 out of 30 MP. He had used 5 mana, but earned 1 back for killing his enemy. He could only do that 6 more times before he was out. Alternatively, he could save most of it for a major beam attack on the boss. His eyes darted to the rest bonus icon in the corner of his vision, and as he focused on the blue eye in the white square, its information panel reappeared. Rest bonus 1, plus 10 health, plus 10 mana. Gain 1 mana per kill. Duration, exit. Start your climb off right. Killing enemies would give him some of the lost mana back, and they dropped items, so finding and destroying everything on the floor seemed well worth it. That is, if he could survive. Jack decided he would just have to take it as it came and try not to face more than one of these at a time if he could help it. Looking down, he inspected the pair of boots resting in sparkling crystal shards, and a panel opened. Brass-banded boots, feet, value 2, defense 3. The item had a red tint along the edges, indicating he wasn't going to be able to wear this type of armor. He picked up the boots and put them in his inventory. They sat alone on the upper left corner of the display, a vast empty space to fill with items for the town. His attention was drawn to the ridiculous item limit he seemed to have. Plenty of space indeed. He looked on the ground for any items that might have dropped from the other creature, but he didn't see anything other than crushed crystal. Jack focused on his new and improved sword and noticed it now had 4 out of 10 in the value stat. Jack wondered what would happen if he got to 10 out of 10 value. He shook his head to clear his thoughts. He had a job to do. With fresh determination and an upgraded sword, Jack carefully returned to the intersection. He turned left and tried to keep a sharp eye out for white fluttering ribbons. The path ahead of him curved to the right, and he could see himself getting lost here easily. Everything looked the same. After an uneventful stretch of ground-up crystal, he came to an open dead-end area with a wooden crate resting in the exact center. Suspicious, Jack approached the box carefully. It was simply crafted and just begged to be opened. Looking over his shoulder and scanning the area again, he found no threats. His eyebrows crept to the top of his head as he bent down to open the box. Before Jack's hand could touch the lid, his intention alone caused an interface panel to open. Floor 1, chest, ruined leather gloves, hands, value 1, defense 1. Splintered wooden club, value 1, damage 2. A smile spread on his lips as he moved the items into his inventory. After they were both safely in his possession, the wooden chest faded away. Jack straightened and considered his new loot. The first thing he did was move the gloves over to his hands equipment slot, and tight leather coverings appeared over his fingers. He held his hands before his face and saw that the gloves were indeed ruined, as multiple rips and holes made them all but useless. Flexing his fingers, he made a series of tight fists, causing the old leather to creak against the strain. Curious, Jack pulled up his full character panel. Jack, hero class, irrelevant, level 1, health, 15 out of 20, mana, 26 out of 30, defense, 5, dodge, 10, main hand damage 2, offhand damage 0, hit chance 0.87, critical chance 0.01. A slight satisfaction warmed him up from the inside as he glanced across his attributes and imagined them growing more powerful. Jack focused on the club in his inventory and wondered if he could use it to upgrade his weapon as he had done before. Bracing for a flashing light and a booming voice, he moved the club over to his main hand equipment slot. But he got a familiar info panel instead. You cannot remove this item. Please increase complexity S% null parenthesis for more options.
Okay, so I can't merge you with clubs,
he said to himself before he closed all of his menus.
One for me, one for the town, I guess.
Jack turned back, retraced his steps back to the intersection, and continued to explore his first floor in the tower. The concept that he was in some sort of game and not the real world drifted to the front of his consciousness. The fact that everything he was doing now felt completely right bothered him a little. Was he losing his mind? His sense of self? His inward-focused thoughts were shattered when Jack heard a tiny hissing noise from up the path. Flapping in the non-existent wind about 5 feet in front of his face were 2 of the flat snake creatures, and he was disgusted at himself for not paying closer attention. One of the creatures lunged at him, and Jack danced backward while bringing up his sword. When the blade cut the flapping ribbon snake in half, he spared a thought of gratitude to Kron and Raya for making him train the day before. There was no way he would have been able to do this without practice. Jack gripped the white leather-wrapped hilt of his upgraded sword and faced the remaining opponent with confidence. The creature swirled in midair, looking for an opportunity to strike, but Jack could tell it was leery after watching one of its kind dispatched so quickly. Going on offense again, Jack tried the same fake lunge trick that had worked before, causing the snake to try and dodge the telegraphed attack. He smiled as he changed the blade's direction, and with a powerful downward chop, he sliced the creature in half.
Perfect win!
Jack called out to the sky with a deep voice, mimicking a fighting game he enjoyed popping quarters into as a child. He had ended 2 foes without taking a single hit, and gained back 2 more mana points. He searched the sparkling gravel at his feet, but didn't see any items drop this time. With a half-smile plastered on his face, Jack continued forward on the curving path between the dense crystal clusters. A few minutes later, he found another empty circular area with a wooden box. Only this time, it contained no equipment. Floor 1, chest, 25 coins. Jack quickly moved the money over to his inventory and rubbed his tattered gloved fingers together. It felt like an immense weight had been lifted that he really didn't know was there. He wouldn't have to rely on the charity of Lex or the town for his meal tonight. Well, he didn't know exactly how much the fish dinner cost, but he was pretty sure this would cover it. Jack left the dead-end open area and backtracked again, returning to the intersection where he had faced his first enemy. It was a short hike through the sparkling gravel, and he found himself back inside the starting area. Feeling pretty good about things, Jack picked one of the other paths leading away from the exit orb, and he prowled among the crystals looking for more prey. 2 more flying ribbon snakes eventually blocked his way forward, but now that he had a better idea of how to exploit their intelligence with feint attacks, he dispatched them both quickly without taking any more damage. Jack was positively glowing as he bent down to collect the one item drop. Rotten leather jerkin, chest, value 2, defense 2. His current chest armor had a defense value of 3, and he was a little disappointed by the lower quality drop, but he felt good about collecting more loot to feed the town. Plus, because of the rest bonus mana per kill, he was back up to full power. He came to another intersection and picked the right side again, trying to be methodical in his exploration of this crystal maze. As Jack pushed deeper into floor 1, he was growing disappointed that he hadn't run into more enemies or chests. About 15 minutes of crunching through gravel passed, and he tried to stay focused through the boredom. It was then that he finally discovered something unique. Down another intersection, he noticed an enormous glowing blue crystal hovering above the ground, and weak arcs of electricity radiated out into the ground under the elongated clear gem at the end of the path. The blue-white light show it cast onto the sparkling shards in the area was absolutely mesmerizing. Jack turned again and strode directly toward this new and interesting object. He was about 10 paces away when a bolt shot out from the 10-foot gem and struck the gravel to his left. He pulled out his sword as the rock that had been hit by the lightning rose up and whizzed right at his head. Completely unprepared for the attack, the small, sharp gem struck him square in the forehead, and his hit points flashed red. 13 out of 20 HP.
Shit!
Jack yelled, backing away. Was this the floor boss? He held his sword up, ready to deflect another attack, when he saw the glowing white sphere of the boss's exit orb by a cluster of crystals in the corner of this area. With a twisted grin, Jack held out his sword toward the giant clear gemstone near the back of the room and activated his mining laser attack. A burst of red energy blazed out from his upgraded sword, and he felt his mana begin to drain as he prepared to unload his entire pool of mana on the strange, perfectly cut gemstone creature. His beam lit the floor boss up with a crimson glow, and he heard something that sounded like a mix between screeching and breaking glass. After about 4 seconds and 8 mana, he saw a white flutter from his right. Before he could react, stinging pain pierced the back of his neck, and he was forced to cancel his attack. He dropped to the ground and rolled, trying to get the fanged ribbon snake off. Jack staggered to his feet just as another magically charged pebble zipped at his face, cutting open his cheek. 7 out of 20 HP. Jack began to panic. He was so pissed at himself for just walking right up to this unknown thing without checking to see if there were any of the annoying flying snakes in the area. Now he was in severe danger. The white snake flapped in the air in front of him as the living gemstone charged up another attack. He was ready this time and was able to duck the more powerful boss attack, but the hissing snake took the opportunity to dart past and try to shave off more of his health. Jack swung his sword up to meet the snake, but he was beyond flustered and still off balance from dodging the rock. The snake nicked his arm as its flat serpentine body flapped past, taking more of his dwindling life. 6 out of 20 HP. With a roar of rage, Jack activated his double strike and cut the ribbon snake to ribbons, ending its life. He spun to face the floor boss again, only to be struck in the side of the head by another stone. 3 out of 20 HP. Jack's eyes almost bulged out of his head from rage. He leveled his sword on the cut gem boss monster and prepared to continue his ultimate attack, when he heard more tiny hissing entering from the path behind him. With an instant to decide, Jack grit his teeth as he sprinted for the exit orb. His stomach twisted into knots, hating himself for losing everything and failing on his first try. He just barely ducked another rock as he slammed his fist on the glowing orb that would take all his items away and send him back outside to face the town with shame. Chapter 11. Jack found himself standing under swift black clouds outside of the tower.
Damn it!
He swore as self-loathing quickly took over. He could tell Lex was right next to him, but the last thing he wanted to see was the disappointment that he knew he would find in her eyes. Raya and a few townsfolk had gathered near the fountain to wait for them, and when he looked at the thick, freckled woman, she gave him a tight-lipped frown. "Ha!" A familiar gruff voice snorted behind him, and Jack turned around to see Herrick standing by the cliffs.
Still a level 1. Told you he was a curse. Nothing but an extra drain on our thin resources.
The old bearded man kept his wild bloodshot eyes locked on Jack as he and the other townsfolk walked away. Only Lex and Raya remained. He saw the leather-clad woman hold her hand out to the chest to deposit her haul and turned his eyes down to his own hands. The ruined gloves were gone, but he wasn't surprised. It was exactly what he was told would happen if he ran. Just to see it for himself, he opened his inventory. No items and 0 coin.
Jack,
Lex said from his side, putting her hand on his shoulder.
it's okay.
He shrugged off her touch and spun toward her.
It's not! I never learn! Damn it!
She recoiled from him, and what he did see, reflected in her large eyes, was disgust. He didn't blame her. He was disgusted with himself. Lex's dark eyebrows were pulled down and her lips were pursed as she dealt with the full brunt of his anger. Her mouth snapped shut after a few heartbeats, and then she turned to walk away. Jack thought about stopping her, but his mood was dark as the fast-moving clouds above him. Perhaps it would be better if he were left alone for a while. Then he heard his old team lead's voice in his mind.
Think before you act, Jack. Before you do anything, ask yourself, what would Stevens do?
He could even see the skin around the older man's gray-blue eyes wrinkle as he made the lame joke. But it was good advice. Why did that feel like so long ago? He watched Lex walk past Raya toward the inn and spoke loudly to be heard over the growing wind blowing in from the sea.
Lex, I'm sorry I snapped at you.
The shorter, leather-clad woman paused, but didn't turn around. Raya stopped with her and shot glances between Lex and Jack. He continued.
I'm just so mad at myself for letting everyone down.
Lex said something to Raya that was lost to the wind. Her auburn-haired friend nodded and shot one more glance at Jack, causing her long braid to almost slap herself in the face before clomping toward the inn alone. The golden-haired woman in the tight black armor spun around and walked back up to Jack, her eyes locked on his. Her straight hair blew back from her face as the wind hit her, and it reminded him of the ribbon snakes he had just faced in the tower.
Walk with me,
Lex said, searching his eyes before she turned and walked away. He followed her off the smooth stones layered in front of the tower, and they both strolled along the cliff with the vast dark ocean on their left. White plumes of water shot up into the air as the waves impacted the distant black boulders that cradled the bay. After walking in silence for a while, she finally spoke.
Did you learn anything in the tower today?
He took a moment before answering.
Yes, I need to be careful and look where I'm going before rushing into something. And clearing the floor before facing the boss might be a good idea.
She looked over at him.
Then you haven't let me down.
He took in a deep breath of crisp sea air. By how quickly the temperature was dropping, he could tell it was going to start raining any minute. Lex used her inventory interface to instantly equip her heavy cloak before she continued.
I didn't go in alone my first time. I accompanied a full party of experienced climbers, and they walked me through with ease. My father and my mother were with me, and they would have not let me come to harm."
She paused, but Jack remained quiet. Farther out across the waving grass to their right, they passed by the ruins of the farm where he spent his first night, and she spoke again.
"Just learn. Don't give up and don't die. Jack, it might be many, many days before you find the right drops or the right layout, but eventually you'll defeat the first-floor boss."
She stopped, reached out, and put one of her gloved hands on his arm.
"Hold still,"
she said. Jack stopped and faced the elfish woman standing in front of him. Icy gusts of wind from the sea sent her cloak flapping behind her and exposed her pointed ears. She closed her large eyes, opened her mouth, and began to sing a wordless melody. Jack was enthralled. Yellow wisps of glowing energy spun around his body, and a pleasant tingling sensation washed over him like he had just sunk into a warm bath. Then his hit points display began to throb with her voice. 4 out of 10 HP, 5 out of 10 HP, 6 out of 10 HP. Jack had totally forgotten he was near death. Lex finished her song, and he was left fully restored. When she looked up into his eyes, he put his hand over hers and said,
"Thank you."
"You're welcome,"
she said.
"You cut it too close in there today, but I can tell you tried."
He gave her a weak smile, and they stood on the cliffs of Blackmoor Cove for a moment before the silence became awkward and she pulled her hand back. Lex gathered her cloak with a fist at her chest and continued leading him away from town. After a short walk through the waving grass, they came upon the corruption that infested the land. He had seen this before when helping Garl get the fishing net, but that was below, down on the beach. Then the purple writhing mass of purple-black pus was blocked by the ocean on one side and the cliff on the other. Now that he was up here, Jack could see that it spread for miles over the rolling hills ahead of him. Lex kept her gaze locked on the corruption as she spoke.
"I wanted to heal you before we reached the edge of the town's influence, just in case. But the reason I brought you here was to remind you what your true enemy is. It's not anything in the tower."
She turned her golden eyes up to his before she continued.
"And it's not yourself. Get that straight right now."
Jack looked down into her eyes again. He saw a deep pain there, and he realized that Lex was speaking from experience. He nodded and turned back to face the stretch of insanity spread out before him. He was glad she brought him here and resolved to get his mind right. Maybe this time it would hold. They looked out over the vile substance for a while longer before Lex motioned with her head that she was ready to go. They walked back across the cliffside, and Jack's thoughts raced through his head. He felt stupid for exploding like he did when he came out of the tower, and in front of an audience, too. And to think, he wanted to lead his own team in the silver mines. Looking within himself, Jack felt a new thread of determination glowing in his core. Even though everything around him was obviously just a game, he had never felt more focused on working on his discipline. He also didn't want to die, and survival meant better equipment. Then a realization crashed into the side of his head like a freight train. Jack's eyes darted down to his sword and saw the same white leather hilt. He stopped walking and pulled up his character window.
"What is it?"
Lex said, also stopping and turning toward him. He ignored her and willed info about his decorative leather scabbard to appear. ARV Alternus, sword, value 4 out of 10, damage 2, hit chance plus 0.02.
It's the same.
Jack mumbled, drawing his weapon. Lex took a step back, but then turned her attention down to the blade, and her eyes opened wider than he had ever seen them open. At that moment, the black clouds racing overhead burst open and frigid drops of rain washed over the landscape. Lex ignored the downpour for an instant, locking her eyes on Jack with a new and potent expression of awe. Then reality caught up to her. Lex pulled up the hood on her cloak and began sprinting toward the inn and out of the rain. Jack chased after her, hitting every drop on the way. The eye of the storm was warm, and the smells hitting his nose reminded him how hungry he was. It was almost enough to distract him from the ramifications of his odd and still upgraded weapon. When the door closed behind him, Lex yanked off her hood and spun around to face him.
How?
She started to say more and cut herself off. The common room was more filled than it had been yesterday, and everyone's eyes turned to them. The blonde, elfish woman in front of him darted her eyes around as she thought, and then shook her head.
Whew! How cold it is out there,
she said, obviously trying to cover up what she meant to say.
Yeah. Windy, huh?
Jack tried to play along. They were both terrible actors, and it wasn't until they were seated at a table did the murmuring conversation start up again. Demi gracefully stepped up to their table shortly after.
Everything go okay today?
She was looking between them both, one of her silver eyebrows arching in such a way that implied that she expected an interesting answer.
Fine.
Lex said quickly, giving her friend a smile.
He's still a level 1, but I think Jack has potential.
She held out her leather-gloved hand to the innkeeper that Jack began to recognize as the standard trade offer gesture.
2 dinners and 2 rooms, please.
The older woman squinted her eyes, but pawed the air and accepted the trade.
Coming right up,
Demi said, then turned to him.
Glad to see you survived your first solo run, Jack.
I wouldn't have if it weren't for you. Thank you again.
He flashed her a smile loaded with genuine gratitude. Demi just nodded and left to do whatever it was she did behind the white eye curtain. When he turned back to face Lex, he found her large eyes boring into him. He wanted to talk more about his rule-breaking item, but she was giving him clear signals that he should just keep his mouth shut about it. He gave her a short, quick nod, intending to convey that he got the message. The Bastion sitting across from him took in a deep breath and let it out, visibly relaxing. She seemed to notice that she was still wearing her armor and took a moment to switch her equipment loadout to a soft green tunic. Lex tucked an errant strand of blonde hair behind a pointed ear before she spoke.
So, tell me about your first floor, Jack.
Well, everything was a maze of crystals, and it was like nothing I have ever seen. I fought a few of these flying snake things and felt like I was getting the hang of their attack patterns. I butchered the last few I faced.
Lex nodded slowly.
Good, but always be prepared for the unexpected. Don't bet your life on any pattern repeating. Tell me about the floor boss.
It was a giant gemstone that chucked rocks at me using magic lightning bolts. Did a lot of damage. I walked right up to it like an idiot. Before I was able to do much, another flying snake sunk its fangs into my neck from behind. It was bad.
Jack looked down into the wood grains of the table.
Definitely going to clear the floor first tomorrow.
Demi came back to their table and provided them with the same meal they had the day before. He felt horrible about making Lex pay for him again. Her father's words really stung him earlier. Jack looked up into her golden eyes.
Thank you again. For dinner.
It really is nothing, Jack. I have nowhere else to spend the coin I find. But you are welcome, nonetheless.
They ate in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Every now and then, thunder from the storm raging outside could be heard over the murmuring townsfolk crowded around the roaring hearth. Based on the condition of their ancient stone houses, he didn't blame them. Lex waved Raya over after they finished, and they chatted for a while before he felt like it was time for bed again. The timer still showed that there was about 2.5 hours before it switched to the door with the up arrow, entrance o'clock. Time was funny here, he realized. Based on a bit of quick math, the days were only 21 hours long. Then again, he skipped ahead over 6 hours when he slapped the exit orb on the first floor. He still had so many things to learn about this world.
I have a question.
Jack said when he found a break in the one-sided conversation Raya was having about being sick of seaweed.
What is this world called? Are we in a country? Are there other countries or other groups of...
He stopped when he saw that they were looking at him like he was talking nonsense. Raya cracked a smile and gave him an answer.
Our world is called Subroutine Sana, Jack.
His heart skipped a beat.
Did you just say subroutine?
He asked. The woman with the long braid looked over at Lex and gave her a little bump with her shoulder.
Aw, I think it's cute. He's just so helpless,
Raya said, and then turned her dark brown eyes on his.
You are such an odd creature.
Jack rubbed his eyelids with his fingers and then tried to wrap his mind around this again.
Does the word subroutine mean anything else to you guys?
The women looked at each other and then back at him, Lex with a small frown and Raya with a half smile. Both shook their heads from side to side.
Does it mean something else to you?
Lex asked.
Back on Earth, it was something computers did,
he said, thinking about his home again. It struck him suddenly that he still had no desire to use the bathroom.
Back on Earth?
Yeah, it's where I came from. Where I was before here.
Raya looked disappointed.
Oh, we all live on dirt, Jack. Well, I hear some towns are on sand, but I bet there's earth underneath the sand.
Never mind.
Jack cut her off.
Yes.
Lex said, standing abruptly.
Maybe someday we can all learn about the people of this world. But now, it's time for us climbers to call it a night.
The doughy woman in overalls frowned, but wished them both good luck in the tower tomorrow. With a few waves to the other townsfolk, Jack followed Lex up the stairs, and his eyes rested on her slightly pointed ears. This was something he was going to ask about tomorrow, but carefully. He expected a repeat of the previous night, but Lex wordlessly entered his room and closed the door once he was in with her.
Tell me, very slowly, how that thing works.
For an instant, he thought things were about to get much more exciting, but he realized she was pointing to his sword belt.
What?
He began with a smirk.
You mean you weren't born with this specific knowledge?
Her golden eyes darkened.
This is not a game.
I know.
He lied.
Honestly, I'm not sure how it works myself. I seem to be able to, merge specific weapon types with this irremovable item. Upgrade it. It worked with a blade I found, but not a club.
Her beautiful eyes bounced back and forth, and Jack could tell she was reading over its item description. He shifted a little, feeling her intense attention on him. Eventually, she turned those big eyes up to lock on his.
Keep this between us for now,
she said, her voice low and serious.
My father already mistrusts you, and there are many townfolk who are wary of change. We are so close to slipping backward. 3, maybe even 2 bad luck runs in the tower, and Blackmoor Cove and all its people could become erased, with no one to even carry the sad memory of our bleak existence.
Man, that's dark, Lex.
It's our lives.
Jack reached out and put his hand on her shoulder. She had a smaller frame, and his hand easily closed around more of her dark green tunic than he expected.
We'll save this town together,
he said with conviction.
Especially since now we know that I can cheat.
She nodded and tilted her head down to face their boots on the wooden floor. His eyes were drawn to her ears again, and he just had to know. He took his hand off her shoulder.
Lex?
He started and waited for her to look back up into his eyes.
I want to ask you something, and I want to preface my question by reminding you that I know nothing about this world.
I know, Jack. That's been obvious.
Great. Then you cannot be mad at me when I ask why your ears are different than everyone else's.
He winced, hoping she didn't become upset and storm out of his room. The golden-haired woman in front of him absent-mindedly brought a hand up to one of the ears in question. He sensed her hesitation and felt compelled to blurt out more.
I mean, I think they're beautiful, that you are,
He stopped when her hand dropped, and a red hue crept up her neck and filled her cheeks. He really hoped he hadn't just made a serious mistake.
You don't need to answer if...
No, it's fine.
She said, blinking away her fluster.
1 in every 1,000 people are born with ears like mine. It's said they are good luck, and people like me are sought after for climbing groups.
Suddenly, her mood darkened considerably, and her golden eyes seemed to dim to a light brown. Lex looked deep into his soul before she continued.
I can tell you from personal experience that it's not true, not in the slightest.
He nodded and regretted asking.
Good night, Jack,
She said, all the light gone from her voice. Then she turned and left his room. He got out.
Good night.
Before she shut the door to his room behind her. Chapter 12. The next day started like the last, but the last night's storm had left the morning air much colder than Jack was comfortable with. He practiced swinging his upgraded sword under the gray sky for a while, but quickly returned to the eye of the storm to wait for Lex and Demi. The tower timer told him he had about an hour to wait before breakfast was served, and Jack used this time to mentally prepare for his next attempt at Floor 1. He opened his character interface and scanned over his equipment slots. They seemed to be the key to growing stronger. Main hand, ARV Alternus, sword, value 4 out of 10, damage 2, hit chance plus +0.02. Offhand, none. Chest, simple leather harness, chest, value 3, defense 3. Legs, common cloth pants, legs, value 1. Feet, fished up boots, feet, value 0. Defense 1. Hands, none. Head, none. Ring, none. Ring, none. Amulet, none. Decorative shirt, common cloth shirt, chest, value 1. Decorative belt, none. Decorative cloak, none. Decorative hat, none. The dark blue curtain with the painted eye swished aside as Demi stepped out, but paused when she saw him.
An early riser, are we?
She said, crossing her long, thin arms over her apron.
Just getting my head right.
He had almost referred to their lives as a game again. He needed to stop doing that. Even if it was, the people around him were not only good people that he didn't want to hurt, but they might be the only ones capable of helping him to get out. Although, if Jack was being honest with himself, the concept of waking up became less and less important with each passing day. The door to the inn opened, and Jack looked over his shoulder to see a man he had never seen before. The guy was huge, easily 7 feet tall, with a barrel of a chest and thick arms. He looked like Kron's brother, minus the armor. When the gray eyes of the newcomer met Jack's, he froze, shock on his face.
Pan, come on in,
Demi said with a soft voice.
This is Jack, Blackmoor's newest hero.
The brute called Pan stood motionless, his eyebrows raised, and Jack was getting the impression that this big fella might be a little slow.
Hi there,
Jack said with a smile. The man's eyes went wide, and then he averted his gaze to the stone floor.
Pan works really hard to bring us lumber from the forest,
Demi added, filling the awkward silence.
He's had it rough since we lost the lumber mill. I take it that the firewood's out back?
The muscular man nodded but kept his eyes on the floor.
Come and sit. Your breakfast will be ready soon. Jack was just on his way up to his room.
The innkeeper shot Jack a pleading look, and he got the hint. There was more to this story, but he didn't want to make things difficult or disrupt these people's lives. With a quick nod to Demi, Jack slid off the bar stool and waved once to the man standing motionless by the front door.
Nice to meet you, Pan.
The hour went by quickly as Jack laid on his bed with his hands behind his head. There were relationships and systems in place within the town he wanted to get settled in his mind. Why did Sol own the fish? Why did Kron pay for the guards' meals? How did he earn money to pay for their food? The economy of this place didn't make much sense at the moment. He heard Lex's door open and close out in the hallway and followed afterward back down into the common room. The blonde woman hopped up onto a stool as he came down the stairs.
Morning, Jack,
She said with a weak smile.
Morning, Lex. I'm ready to do this.
Before she could speak, Demi came spinning out from behind the curtain. She put her hands on her hips as she watched Jack take a seat next to Lex.
Thank you, Jack.
She began.
Pan is fragile. He visits with me and has his breakfast alone in the early morning, then works to single-handedly supply firewood for the whole town. No small feat with the tools he has.
Jack nodded.
Is this a town-level thing?
Lex answered.
Yes, it is. But he lost his whole family to a spawn attack when he was a child. I try to give him his space and not come down to the bar until 2 to close.
Got it,
Jack said. He must have just missed Pan the day before as he practiced with his sword out by the cliffs. The silver-haired innkeeper put her hand out, and a plate of the same seaweed-wrapped fish from yesterday appeared before him. While Jack and Lex ate in silence, his resolve hardened even further. These people had crappy, unfortunate lives. He was starting to understand why Lex was so hopeful when he landed on his ass outside the tower. Jack scarfed down his food quickly, then stood as soon as his rest bonus kicked in.
Thank you again, Demi. And Lex, for paying.
They both watched him as he equipped his chest armor, then he continued.
Sorry to rush off like this, but I cannot wait any longer. See you at exit, Lex.
The elfish woman regarded him with a soft expression, then nodded slowly. Jack gave both women a curt nod of goodbye, and then proceeded straight for the tower. He didn't look up at its impossible height or anywhere else but the small wooden door embedded in its base. Pausing for a moment to take a deep breath, Jack cleared his head and then grabbed the iron ring bolted to the weather-beaten wood. Pure white light surrounded him. When he could see again, he was standing in the middle of a warm bamboo forest. Perfectly straight green sticks shot up at least 50 feet into the bright teal sky above him, where a sparse canopy of leaves layered everything below in weak translucent shadows. Under his boots, he found a wide, dried bamboo walkway suspended a few feet above the waterlogged landscape with a railing to each side. The only sound was a deep gurgle of a single frog somewhere out in the dense emerald forest. Turning slowly, Jack noticed the exit orb pulsating softly behind him on its stone plinth. The dried bamboo path ended, complete with a railing, and left him with only one way to go. Jack drew his sword, the metal blade whispering against the leather of his cursed, glitchy sheath. He had a job to do. He crept forward for a good 10 minutes before finding any kind of change. The path continued to slice right through the bamboo forest straight ahead, but he finally came upon an offshoot footpath to the right. It stretched for about 15 yards over a still pool of water before opening up to what appeared to be a wider circular platform. Jack tried not to let his boots clomp down too hard on the suspended bamboo bridge, and he slowly peeked between the thin trees, but there wasn't any movement or anything else to indicate danger. Holding his sword out in front of him, Jack stepped onto the bamboo platform and found it devoid of anything interesting. The area was a perfect circle with short lengths of bamboo fashioned into a primitive railing around the entire edge. He spun around and saw nothing but bamboo in every direction but up. He cast his gaze into the vibrant teal sky and heaved a sigh. His arm was getting tired from constantly holding his sword, so he put it back in its sheath. The fatigue in his bicep was just another reminder that he still had much to learn, and he felt foolish for carrying the length of metal around for so long. Jack sat down in the center of the platform, taking some time to clear his head and to give his right arm a chance to relax. The environment was actually quite peaceful. There was no sun in the sky, yet he felt comfortably warm, and he allowed the silent emerald forest to spread tranquility through his mind and body. That was until the lone frog let out another long croak. It seemed like he was getting closer to the little guy. He rested for a few minutes and recovered from the unnecessary strain on his arm, then was ready to continue his sweep of Floor 1. After returning to the suspended walkway through the bamboo forest, Jack came upon another offshoot. It was a mirror of the last one, a short path leading to an open area, but this time to the left, and his eye was drawn to movement on the open platform. It was hard to tell at this distance, but it appeared to be a slowly moving white shell. Sure enough, as Jack crept closer, there was no mistaking it. The creature was a 4-foot snail. Its body was black and brown, and it had 2 probing wet antennae protruding from its head. With no discernible eyes, he wondered if the thing would even be able to see him. Its shell was a bright white spiral with a hint of pink iridescence when it reflected the light in just the right way. The creature seemed to be aimlessly slinking its blob-like body around on the dried bamboo platform, scrunching and lengthening as it moved. Jack pulled his sword and considered his options. His first instinct was just to run in and stab it in its sightless face, but right before he did, he realized that he had no idea if this was the floor boss or not. After what happened last time, he was not going to take any chances. Quietly, he approached the platform with the snail and tried to locate the presence of a second exit orb. The oversized creature rotated away from him, and Jack embraced the opportunity. While its back was turned, he took a few brisk steps forward to get a better view of the open area. After a quick sweep of the circular railing that fenced in the platform, Jack was relatively certain that this was not the floor boss. Confident he could take out the slow-moving, squishy snail, he approached the giant creature with the intent to slice it open. When he got within about 10 feet, the snail's roving antennae both angled toward him, and its body turned to follow. He could walk faster than this thing was moving, but just to be safe, Jack took a few steps backward. It didn't matter. The creature let out a quiet hissing noise, and then he noticed a green cloud of gas spreading out from under its shell. He covered his mouth with his free hand and stopped breathing, but as soon as one particle of the foul substance touched his skin, another status alert flashed into existence near his rest bonus. The instant nausea he felt made it clear that this was bad, but a quick glance up to the green cloud icon sitting in a black box cleared up any doubt. Noxious gas, minus 50% chance to hit, 1 damage over 60 seconds. If that wasn't enough, the giant snail's head split open to reveal circular rows of dagger-like teeth, and it reminded Jack of a leech's mouth. Although the creature was slow, the combination of the gas and the mucus-filled maw of sharp points were enough to cast doubts in Jack's mind. His back hit the railing, and he considered making a quick dash back out to the straight path, but Lex's big golden eyes swam to the front of his mind. He was not going to let her down again. With a battle cry, Jack lunged forward and slashed at the creature before him, but his sword suddenly felt unwieldy, as if it had a mind of its own. The slice angled to the side at the last moment and whiffed through open air instead. The slimy creature made a lunge for Jack's chest, but he dove under the attack and tried to roll away. Jack realized that he needed to tuck his sword close to his chest as he performed the evasive maneuver, and almost lost his weapon in the process. He stood up, coughing out a lungful of the green gas that filled the platform, and took pride in the fact that he didn't disembowel himself during the improvised acrobatics. The creature needed a few seconds to turn its body, and Jack took the opening. He lunged forward with the tip of his blade and aimed downward for its soft foot. The moment he was about to impale its slimy black flesh, his arm jerked upward, and the blow rang off the creature's rock-hard shell instead. The sword vibrated up his hand and made his arm feel a bit numb, but he clenched his teeth and struck again. This time he drew blood. Jack's sharp blade sliced into the creature's front, just above where it squeezed out from under its spiral mobile home, and a green oozing substance began to leak from the disgusting sack this thing called a body. He danced away and made the creature continue to turn as it sought to sink its sharp teeth into him. Jack swung and missed a few times, but a lucky wild attack lopped off one of the snail's antennae. It reared its head up toward the sky and let out a silent scream as Jack reversed the momentum of the blade to follow up with a backhand slice. To his surprise, the attack cut deeply into its black flesh where its throat should be, and the monster vanished, taking the cloud of noxious gas with it. A small pile of coins appeared in the giant snail's place and fell to the ground with a satisfying clatter. Jack put his hands on his knees and sucked in the sweet, clean air that permeated the bamboo forest. On a whim, he checked his vitals. 20 out of 20 HP, 30 out of 30 MP. He smiled. It must have been extremely close, but he managed to dispatch the thing before he took any damage from the gas. Still doubled over, Jack shuffled forward and willed the pile of gold into his inventory, then checked to see how much more than 0 he had now. Coins, 13. It was a start. He sheathed his sword and searched for anything of interest on the dead-end circular platform. He didn't find anything, so he left the area and continued his journey along the main footpath. He sensed a pattern emerging when another path split off on the right. Peering ahead along the short bridge, he saw another circular open area crafted from more dried bamboo. There didn't seem to be a snail that he could see, but a small bamboo box resting in the middle caught his attention. Carefully, Jack moved along the connecting path to the dead-end circular platform, but there was nothing here but the box. Still wary, he kept looking over his shoulder as he approached the possible loot stockpile, but nothing jumped out at him. He squatted down and held his hand out to the chest, willing its inventory interface to appear. Floor 1, chest, shredded chain vest, chest, value 2, defense, 2, sacrificial blade, dagger, value 2, damage, 2. Jack pulled the items into his own inventory and focused for a moment on the dagger. It was short, but the painted image in his inventory gave him the impression that the blade was sharp. Mentally crossing his fingers, he dragged the sacrificial dagger over to his main hand slot. He forgot to close his eyes this time and cursed when the light flashed from the scabbard at his hip.
Good!
The ominous voice boomed from the sky. Jack ignored it and waited for the afterimages burned into his retinas to fade. When his vision was clear enough, Jack focused on his main hand slot again. ARV Alternus, sword, value 6 out of 10, damage 3, hit chance plus .02. He stood up and gave the sky a fist bump.
Woo! Up to 3 damage, baby!
The frog in the distance croaked back a response. He couldn't equip the chain vest, so Jack walked back out to the main elevated footpath through the swampy bamboo forest and continued forward through floor 1. The pattern repeated, and before long he was faced with another dried bamboo bridge that led to an open area on the left. Jack could easily see the white shell of at least one giant farting snail from where he stood on the main footpath. He tried to formulate a plan as he crept forward toward the slinking creature. Staying away from the mouth and circling its shell was the obvious answer, but he wondered if he could get in and kill it before the cloud went off, or at least do some damage with his normal hit chance. Jack checked the area first and made sure there were no extra enemies or exit orbs on the platform before he did anything. Then, as he waited for the aimlessly wandering monster to face away from him, he thought of a way to supercharge his plan. Crouched against the railing just outside the platform and slowly breathing in and out of his nose, Jack waited for his opportunity. When it came, he sprung, drawing his sword as he moved. As the giant snail turned its long body away from the entrance to the platform and slunk toward the back railing, Jack dashed forward and closed the distance quickly. He slashed his sword downward with as much force as he could muster. The moment before it made contact, Jack activated his double strike ability, and his sword became a blur as he sliced the living sack of goo in half. The monster faded away, and a pair of boots fell to the ground where it had been. He bent down to check the drop. Canvas moccasins, feet, value 2, max mana +2. Jack rocked back to sit on the dried bamboo as he considered this interesting item. He could put on these new, flimsy shoes and have a bigger mana pool. However, that would mean giving up on some defense. He pulled up his character screen and focused on the boots he received from Garl. Fished-up boots, feet, value 0, defense 1. Discarded, flimsy, and smell of the sea. In the end, he kept on his fishy leather boots and stashed the magic shoes in his inventory. He only had 4 total defense as it was. Even though Jack didn't fully grasp what the number did, or affected, the extra 2 mana didn't seem worth it, especially since his priority was to stay alive. Jack walked back along the path, and the croaking seemed to grow increasingly louder. The frog had to be right under him. By the time he came to the next offshoot from the main path, the sound was almost deafening. He checked down the bridge, expecting to see another platform, and he wasn't wrong. What he didn't expect to see was a bullfrog the size of a dump truck. Jack immediately crouched next to the dried bamboo railing on the main path and peeked at the gargantuan creature sitting idly on a wider platform. Its protruding hourglass eyes didn't seem to notice him, or if it did, the thing didn't react. Perhaps it only attacked once he approached. Jack shot a glance down the wide suspended footpath he'd been traveling and confirmed that it continued for quite a while beyond this point. This massive amphibian had to be the floor boss, but Jack told himself he couldn't be sure until he saw its nearby exit orb. It was an easy choice to skip this area and come back later. Jack stayed in a squatting position as he shambled away from the giant croaking creature and continued down the main footpath. At the usual distance, he came to an additional platform hosting another giant snail. Before he rushed out, Jack considered his options. He definitely wanted to blast the boss with his mining laser, and he wanted to have as much mana as he could get for that attack. The double strike he used before took a whopping 5 mana. He checked his total. 26 out of 30 MP. Jack quickly dismissed the idea of using his ability and decided to save up for the boss. If everything worked out, he could take advantage of the rest bonus and get back to full mana by clearing the rest of the floor. His mind made up, Jack crept forward and waited for the white-shelled snail to face away from him. When it did, he silently rushed forward and stabbed his sword into the pus bag's head. It felt like he did some serious damage, but the giant snail didn't vanish. Instead, it began to turn and sent out its noxious cloud. Landing that first strike, however, made a huge difference in the length of the fight. He employed the same technique of circling around the slow creature. He missed a few times, but it was dead within 30 seconds. The snail and its stinking cloud vanished, leaving a ridiculously long staff to clatter to the bamboo platform. Jack inspected the drop. Dusty driftwood staff, 2-hand staff, value 4, damage 2, max mana +5, magic power +1.
Ooh,
he said to himself. The red outline meant he couldn't use the weapon, but he was pleased to see a higher value item. Jack tucked the staff into his inventory and made a mental note to ask Lex what the stat magic power did. If he had to guess, it was like damage for pure magic users. As an experiment, he tried to merge the staff with his upgradable blade, but wasn't surprised when it didn't work. Jack continued down the wide bamboo footpath and came across 5 more platforms before he reached the end. He killed 2 more giant snails, only picking up 5 more gold coins along the way. Satisfied that he had cleared the whole floor, Jack leaned against the railing on the dead-end path and took stock of his stats. HP, 20 out of 20, MP, 29 out of 30. He was disappointed that he didn't get any new equipment for himself, but the sword upgrade was nice. Jack's plan of attack was to stand as far away from the giant frog as he could and blast it with his mining laser. If there were any snails on the platform, they would take a while to slink all the way out and hopefully not cause a problem. With his plan more or less set, Jack stalked back up the bamboo footpath toward the floor boss. The croaking grew louder once again as he approached the giant wart-covered amphibian. It was still resting on its platform, staring straight ahead. Jack watched the frog's throat bulge outward as it let out another loud, gurgling croak. It looked slightly out of place, just sitting on a bamboo platform, but this was only a game, and Jack was about to conquer this floor. He allowed himself no other choice.
Hopefully there aren't any mates for you out there, bud,
Jack whispered quietly as he stepped one foot on the bridge leading to the boss's platform and drew his sword. He looked down and noticed the same white leather wrapping on the hilt, but the edges seemed a bit sharper than before.
ARV Alternus, whatever the hell you are, don't fail me now.
After he said the words, the blade vibrated in his hand. It was barely perceptible, but it was something. Perhaps it was the sword talking in his head all along. Determination took hold, and Jack held the tip of his weapon out and pointed it at his target. He wondered what the range was on his ability just before it activated, and a red burst of power struck the massive frog crouched about 20 yards ahead of him. Flames engulfed the amphibian, and Jack's mana began to drain. 27 out of 30 MP, 25 out of 30 MP, 23 out of 30 MP. That was when the creature used its powerful back legs and launched high into the air. Jack tried to track his target with his sword, but when the shadow of the colossal creature fell over him, he canceled his ability and sprinted down the path. Directly behind him, the giant frog impacted the spot where he had just been standing, and a visible shockwave sent him sprawling onto his face on the bamboo footpath. 18 out of 20 HP. Scrambling to his feet, Jack spared a glance over his shoulder to see the massive frog make a slow quarter turn to face him. He sprinted a few steps before something moving very fast struck him in the back and knocked him on his face again. 13 out of 20 HP. Jack staggered to his feet and tried to put some distance between them. How was he supposed to defeat this thing? He glanced over his shoulder to keep an eye on the floor boss when he saw its wide-open mouth. Jack's mind put two and two together and realized he'd just been nailed in the back by this thing's tongue. Anticipating another strike, Jack immediately dodged to the right and almost avoided the red slimy wrecking ball. The grazing impact to his left shoulder forced him to stumble a little, but he kept his feet under him and sprinted away from the monster with adrenaline-infused haste. 11 out of 20 HP. Jack's fished-up boots pounded against the dried bamboo walkway in rapid succession as he shot another glance over his shoulder just in time to catch the frog leap into the air again. He knew that if he kept running like this, the boss was going to keep the upper hand. He needed to take control of this battle. As quickly as he could, Jack skidded to a halt and sprinted back the other way, toward where the frog had just been sitting. When the creature impacted the bamboo path behind him, he was knocked to the ground again by his proximity to the white rippling shockwave. 7 out of 20 HP. This time Jack didn't get up. He rolled over, pointed his sword at the frog's ugly green ass, and activated his mining laser. The tip of Jack's sword pulsed once, and a blinding red beam lanced right into the massive floor boss's rear end. Just like the giant snails on this floor, the giant frog had a hard time turning around, and the railings on the footpath made it even more difficult. The unfortunate creature made pitiful gurgling noises as Jack's mana drained. Its tiny front legs tried to navigate around the railings, but its huge body prevented it from turning quickly. Eventually, the massive bullfrog managed to face him, but by then, Jack was up on his feet and ready. The giant amphibian tried to open its mouth to launch another tongue attack, but Jack aimed the red beam of fiery death a bit upward and lit up its skull from the inside, and the battle was over. The floor boss vanished in a spectacular display of glittering dust, and a pile of coins rained down onto the bamboo path where it had been. At the same time, Jack felt an intensely pleasurable wave of power jolt through his body. After a deep breath, he sheathed his sword and checked his stats. Jack, hero class, irrelevant, level 2. Health, 7 out of 20. Mana, 7 out of 30. Defense, 4. Dodge, 10. Main hand damage, 3. Offhand damage, 0. Hit chance, 0.87. Critical chance, 0.01.
Woo!
Jack yelled into the silent and tranquil bamboo forest.
Who's level 2 now?
With a grin, he dismissed his character panel and collected the dropped coins. Jack opened his inventory to see his new total. Coins, 27. He felt absolutely rich, and his grin turned to laughter when he returned to see the golden chest where the massive frog had been sitting on the floor boss platform. He ran right for it, and just before he reached down to loot its contents, a chill ran down his spine. Pulling his sword and spinning in place, he checked to make sure no other monsters were lurking around within the area. With a slow breath blown through his lips, Jack confirmed that there were no more creatures to deal with, and only saw a serene bamboo forest. However, he did notice the boss exit orb and an iron-bound wooden door with the number 2 burned onto the front as if it had been branded. The freestanding door looked odd, just quietly remaining upright on the dried bamboo platform with no support. It had to be the way he got up to the next floor. Shaking his head, he sheathed his sword, trying to remember that he needed to think before acting. Jack held his hand out to the ornate golden chest before him. Floor 1 rewards, boss chest, cracked leather leggings, legs, value 2, defense 2, dented plate boots, feet, value 2, defense 3, rusty claymore, 2-hand sword, value 3, damage 3, plus 0.02 crit chance, bent shortbow, bow, value 3, damage 3. It was an absolute treasure trove. He quickly moved the leather leggings over to his legs slot, and baggy leather pants suddenly enveloped his legs, displacing his currently equipped item into his inventory. They didn't look pretty, but he felt more protected than with the thin cloth pants Lex had given him when he first woke up here, wherever this was. The other item that caught his attention was the 2-handed claymore. Squinting his eyes in preparation for the flash that would hopefully follow, Jack moved the item from the chest onto his main hand slot. Even through his eyelids, the bright burst of power from the sheath attached to his waist was enough to sting.
More!
The deep voice echoed in his mind.
I know!
Jack yelled back.
What do you think I've been doing?
Shaking off the minor annoyance, Jack inspected his upgraded weapon. ARV Alternus, sword, value 9 out of 10, damage 4, hit chance plus 0.02, crit chance plus 0.02. Fulfillment like nothing Jack had ever experienced washed over him as he reveled in his hard-won stats and items. With a grin that just wouldn't go away, he walked up to the floor boss exit orb and hovered his hand over it. Before he touched it, though, his eyes darted over to the wooden door to the next floor. A large part of him wanted to open that door and see if he could come back with treasures untold. But he knew that was a bad idea. That wasn't going to be him anymore, he promised himself, and slapped the exit orb. Chapter 13. He found himself outside, under a clear cobalt sky and the crumbling beat-down town of Blackmoor spread out before him. The crisp sea breeze was a stark contrast to the bright green bamboo forest. Jack noticed Raya standing by the fountain, and that she was the only one there to greet them today. Turning to his right, he faced Lex with a devilish grin.
Level 2.
he said, holding up 2 fingers. A smile spread across her face, and Jack felt once again irreparably addicted to this woman's happiness.
Huh, nice pants,
Raya said as she clomped up to the pair of heroes. Jack looked down at the baggy, cracked leather cylinders hanging off his hips and nodded.
I'd love to show Herrick my...
He began, but he caught Lex's smile leveling out, and Jack quickly course-corrected his mouth.
My appreciation by paying for his daughter's dinner. How much is fish in a room, Lex?
She squinted her eyes and crossed her arms before her smile returned.
3 coin for dinner, 6 for the room and breakfast.
Doing some quick math, 3 dinners was 9 and 2 rooms were 12. That would leave him with 6 coins left over. But what else did he need to spend it on?
All right, Lex, Raya, dinner is on me tonight. Let's celebrate,
he said.
Feed the town first, Jack,
Lex said, indicating the beat-up wooden chest by the edge of the fountain. She seemed to reconsider and added,
Actually, can you show me your loot?
Sure thing.
Jack brought up his inventory and willed the items over to the blonde Bastion wearing leather armor standing in front of him. The trade menu opened, and he filled it with his Floor 1 loot. She was backlit by the blood-orange setting sun, and Jack was distracted by the stunning image, but he could tell she had focused past the trade window and onto the hilt of his sword. Lex looked at him for a moment with her golden eyes, then nodded, declining the trade.
This is good, Jack,
she murmured with a distracted tone, then turned to the chest to deposit her items. He did the same and held his hand out to the chest with the intent to open it. A new black lacquer interface panel opened in his vision. It was a big, empty area with the words Town Input Chest carved into the top left corner.
Input?
Jack said out loud. Lex turned to face him.
Please don't tell me you forget the things you already know. You need to put your loot...
Ha!
He interrupted her.
Wouldn't that be funny? Never mind, I got it. Dumping in items now.
After they both emptied their inventories, Jack unequipped his armor and re-equipped his cloth pants. There was a moment of hesitation before he switched his pants. Even though it was instantaneous, he still felt odd changing in front of the 2 women out in public.
Congratulations, Jack!
Raya cheered and clapped him on the back.
Thanks, Raya. We ready to eat?
They were all grins as the 3 of them entered the inn, and before the door closed behind them, his loud friend with the braided ponytail immediately announced that Jack was now level 2. The eye of the storm exploded with cheers, and a few townsfolk stood to shake his hand. Jack smiled and nodded as Lex led them to an empty table in a relatively quiet corner. He was having a hard time wiping his cheesy grin off his face, and Lex had a hard time keeping the smile from hers as she looked at him. They locked eyes, both silently expressing their shared jubilation over his overpowered sword.
My,
Demi said from behind him. Jack never heard her approach. Her steady eyes appraised him again, and he knew she was inspecting his gear.
Hi, Demi. I'll cover our 3 meals and a room both for Lex and myself.
Jack opened his inventory and willed 21 gold coins over to the innkeeper. She scanned his offer and nodded, slapping the accept button.
You got it,
she said, and swiftly moved to fill their order. Raya clasped her hands under her chin.
You guys are so good to me. But seeing as there's only one fishy dish to spend my coin on, it's really not necessary.
What she said reminded him that he wanted to learn more about how things worked around here.
Who pays the guards?
Jack asked.
Where does the coin come from?
The larger woman smiled, constantly amused by his ignorance.
We get paid from the captain of the guard. That's Kron.
Where does he get it from?
Raya looked over to Lex for support.
The wall, I guess? I don't really know. I've never worried about such things.
The shorter blonde woman shrugged and said,
It's not our job.
Like that settled it.
And Soul, out on the wharf. Where does he get the coin to pay the fisherman?
This again,
Demi said, almost making him jump. The silver-haired innkeeper placed steaming plates of food in front of everyone and then put her hand on her aproned hip.
He gets it from me. I pay him the coin for the raw fish and seaweed.
Jack nodded.
Thanks, Demi.
She returned the nod and left. As he sipped on his tentacle soup, he was starting to get a better grasp of the town's circular flow of coin, except for Kron. This economical puzzling was derailed when Lex looked up from her own soup and spoke.
Tell us about your first victorious floor, Jack.
He told them about the gassy snails and the giant bullfrog, and then he asked Lex to regale them with tales of the 5 floor bosses she defeated. The petite woman held up her hand and counted off on her fingers.
First, there was a wolf with metal claws. 2 was a type of jellyfish creature with some uncomfortable shock attacks. Floor 3 was a skillful skeletal ranger. It was annoying. 4 was, a large rabbit with a horn. And 5 was a massive lustrous pearl that used a horrible sound attack. I'm surprised my ears aren't still ringing.
Sounds intense,
Jack said, then shoveled some of the buttery grilled whitefish into his mouth. In the corner of his vision, he noticed that his HP and MP were restoring as he finished his meal. This was his 3rd identical supper, and although it wasn't anywhere near the point of getting old for him, he could see it becoming an issue over weeks or months. He watched Raya push her fish around on her plate, and he could practically see her disinterest in the food. Her stomach won out in the end, and she eventually finished everything. A few people came by to congratulate him as word spread, and he was happy to see Garl and Wyben again. Just before they went up to their rooms for the night, the inn's door opened. Jack looked over, grateful for anything to distract him from Raya's rant on a horse named Momo she used to brush. Standing in the doorway and letting the cold night air blow into the common room was Herrick, and his bloodshot eyes were already locked on Jack. He staggered forward, and the door closed behind him. Most everyone's eyes were on Lex's father as he swayed on his feet. Jack realized that he hadn't seen the old bearded man inside the inn before and wondered when the guy ate. He took a few steps closer to Jack and squinted his eyes as if reading something. Jack's brows came down, and he wondered why he hadn't been inspecting more people himself. With his attention focused on the old bearded man, Jack willed his character panel open. Herrick, Bygone Hero, Knight, Level 59, Health 139 out of 150, Mana 55 out of 55. Relationship. Disposition, feared. Jack just got to the word feared when Herrick's eyes went wide.
Abomination,
he mumbled, barely audible.
Abomination,
he repeated louder and began to shake. Lex stood up and quickly moved to escort her father outside with a firm grip on his elbow.
I'll see you at breakfast,
she called over her shoulder, and then they were gone. The silence in the common room returned to normal murmuring, and Jack turned back to see a wide-eyed Raya.
What's his deal, anyway?
Jack asked, poking his thumb toward the door. She shook her head briskly, like a dog shaking off water, and her thick auburn braid slapped her shoulders.
He smokes too much joy weed, for one. Ever since Lex's mother died in the tower, it's been downhill from there. He's too old to climb the tower now, but when I was just a sprout, he was the best. Party leaders and fighters came to Blackmoor just to learn from him.
Jack took in a deep breath. He could try and help the town, but Lex's father was fighting a battle only he could fight, and losing by the looks.
Welp,
he said, standing and stretching.
I'm going to call it a night. Train hard at the wall, Raya.
You climb high in the tower. Oh, and thanks for treating me to a fine meal.
She winked one of her dark brown eyes at him, and he waved over his shoulder. Moments later, he closed himself into his room and laid on his bed, thinking about his first victory and the day's events. But his thoughts wandered as he drifted closer to sleep. Did someone become a bygone hero by aging? Were there seasons? Years? How old was Lex? When was Kron's birthday? How did Soul get his job? Everything was so strange here, and he had so many questions. He kept an ear out for Lex's door, but he passed out before he heard anything. The next day, Jack woke up with over an hour before breakfast and decided he didn't want to just lie trapped in his cramped room. He put on his armor and stepped out into the narrow hallway. He paused for a moment and considered knocking on Lex's door, but thought better of it and headed down into the common room. It was empty.
Demi?
Jack called out as he approached the bar, and a few seconds later, the tall, silver-haired woman came spinning around her painted-eye curtain.
Morning, Jack. How can I help you?
I need to do something with myself. Can I make the wharf run for you again this morning? I also want to get out of here before Pan comes.
Demi stared at him for a moment and then nodded.
I like you, Jack. I wasn't sure at first, but I foresee some major changes coming to Blackmoor.
Jack felt a chill, and his attention was drawn to the huge eye painted onto the midnight blue curtain behind him. He shook it off.
I hope to make a positive difference here before I leave. My goal is to push that corruption back. Maybe we could leave together one day and go find your son.
She looked like she'd been slapped in the face, and her usual all-knowing half-smirk faded. She didn't seem mad, though. Demi solemnly nodded and sucked in a shuddering breath. It was the first time he saw her lose her composure.
I'd like that, Jack,
she said, then extended her hand, offering him a trade window with 30 coins.
But first, go get me some fish.
Be back by 2 to close,
he said as he accepted the trade. He exited the inn and took a left at the crossroad, traveling along the dirt path. The sky was overcast and the air held a chill, but his shoddy leather pants broke the biting seaborne wind much better than his old cloth equipment. He passed by the squat stone houses, their sides lit by the rising sun at his back. Next came the fields of verdant green grass waving gently in the salty sea breeze. Eventually, his boots met sand, and he had made it down to the beach. The same massive birds pecked around in the damp sand, hunting for morsels in the early morning gloom. He wondered what the hell they ate. Such a huge creature surely needed many pounds of fish to sustain itself. Jack saw more of the birds circling the cove and the fishermen who stood on boats, casting nets into the dark waters. The dock was empty this time as he stepped up to the wooden building perched up on wooden logs. The windows were all drawn closed. He walked right up to the rickety-looking door and rapped his knuckles a few times.
Soul, it's Jack. Here to buy fish for Demi.
The door pulled inward almost instantly, and a man with striking resemblance to an angry owl wearing black robes stood in the doorway.
"You're early,"
the wharf master said, his angular scowl firmly in place.
Early bird gets the worm, right?
Jack said, flashing a winning smile. The balding man crossed his arms and looked to be about to say something snide, but his tight lips turned into what could be considered an approving frown.
"Indeed. A surprisingly simple bit of wisdom there, hero. Maybe you aren't as stupid as your face suggests."
Soul held out his hand to open a trade, and an image of 15 fish sat waiting for him. Jack thought of 10 or so comments he wanted to make about his stupid face, and then thought better of it. As Jack moved the 30 coins over to the trade window, it occurred to him that he never did see the man's face for dinner at the inn, or his daughter's. Soul accepted the trade and dismissed Jack with the wave of a hand, turning to close his door.
Wait,
Jack said.
you seem like a smart guy. Can I ask you a few questions?
Be that as it may, I'm not a teacher, and you're far too old to be a student. I've better things to do with my time than—
He broke off when Jack opened another trade window and deposited 3 of his remaining 6 coins as an offer.
I understand. Perhaps a bit of compensation for your precious time?
The tall wharf master squinted down at Jack, studying him for a moment, then selected accept on the offer.
Very well. 3 coins, 3 questions. Make them count.
Jack nodded.
Why don't I ever see you or your daughter eating at the inn?
Soul snorted and crossed his arms.
You won't ever catch me or my family supping with my employees or other townsfolk riffraff. I personally prepare nutritious meals for myself and my daughter. 2 questions.
He could cook? Jack wondered if these people had classes like heroes. He focused on the robed man before him and inspected his character window. Soul, townsfolk, wharf master, 34% proficiency. Health, 5 out of 5. Relationship. Disposition, inferior. Proficiency? That was new. Jack resolved to try and remember to inspect everyone from now on. He considered his next question carefully.
Who chose you to be the wharf master?
Ah, here your professed uncanny ignorance rears its head. I almost feel bad charging you for this, but when the previous wharf master was killed during a demon spawn attack, the town chose me to fill the newly open role. Last question. Do try not to waste it.
Things were getting interesting, and Jack's mind spun with hundreds more questions. He almost blurted out something stupid like, "The town chooses?" but was able to stop himself. One of the tall man's sharply slanted eyebrows rose into an arch, and the slight change in his expression conveyed volumes of impatience.
Why do you overcharge when the inn is the only place to spend coin?
Soul gave Jack a devious smile.
That's an ill-phrased question from an irrelevant hero. Your answer is that I am disappointed in you. Our transaction is now complete.
He had no idea what that meant, but Jack caught a sparkle in the detestable man's eye, and it clicked. He had just traded coin to the wharf master in exchange for information. The flimsy wooden plank door clattered closed on its hinges, and Jack found himself standing alone on the docks. As he walked back to the upper part of Blackmoor Cove, Jack realized that the scabbard permanently attached to his hip didn't interfere with his movements nearly as much as it used to. It felt like a part of him. The thought made Jack uneasy. A small wave of claustrophobia echoed through his mind when he remembered that this wasn't even his real body. He stopped, pausing on the dirt path for a moment, and caught his breath. Everything around him felt so real. The cold he felt was currently from the shadow of the tower that fell over him. Jack willed his feet forward into the weak light streaming through the clumps of clouds above. The impossible tower to his left didn't open for business for another 2.5 hours, so he walked towards the fountain instead. How the bubbling water affected anything was still a mystery, although the clues he'd picked up tied it to the town's level or something. If so, it was a pitiful sight. Jack pulled out his upgradable sword and noted that it was a few inches longer than it had been before. He knew the change had to be from the sizable claymore he had recently added. A smile lit his face as he stood and practiced a few attacks and blocks. The new length of the sword threw him off a bit, and he hoped that it wouldn't get comically large as it ate up more bladed weapons. His mind wandered through things the wharf master would be spending his money on. Was there a part of town he hadn't found yet? A hidden casino behind a crack in the cliff? His sword arm grew a bit fatigued as he practiced with its weight under the imposing tower, but he felt like this wasn't a waste of time. There didn't seem to be a stat for how proficient he was at his irrelevant hero class. Time was up, so Jack sheathed his blade and trudged up the dirt path to get his rest bonus. Lex was already sitting at the bar, and they turned to see who had entered. The first thing he noticed was how tired she looked. Her usually golden eyes were ringed with darker circles, and her hair was less blonde and more straw-colored. They exchanged their good mornings, and Demi served them their breakfast at the bar. Before the older woman disappeared behind her curtain, Jack inspected her. Demi. Bygone hero, siren, level 67. Townsfolk, innkeeper. 93% proficiency. Health, 30 out of 30. Mana, 750 out of 750. Relationship. Disposition, liked. He began to wonder where she got all her mana from, but flinched when her panel snapped shut in his face. There had to be a range for inspecting someone. Jack looked over at Lex, wearily eating her meal with slow chews.
Don't worry,
he began around his own mouthful of fish.
I'll be leveling as fast as possible. And before you know it, you'll be able to take a day off for once.
Her sad smile managed to light her eyes, and she swallowed before she responded.
Even with your advantages?
She said as her eyes drifted to the sword.
Don't be surprised if it takes you longer than you think. Do not take any risks. You've already impressed me.
He smiled at that and nodded as he crammed more food into his face.
Got time for a few of Jack's ignorant battle-related questions?
He asked as they were finishing up.
Of course,
she said.
How does the defense number work exactly?
She gave him a little shrug.
More is better. Dodge determines if an attack hits you at all. Defense is what happens if it does.
Okay, fair enough. Does the magic power stat affect my abilities?
Lex popped in the last bite of her seaweed roll and shook her head while she chewed.
I believe you said both abilities are affected by your main hand slot, correct?
He pulled them up just to be sure. Path, Dimensional Blade, 1. Double Strike, activated. 5 mana, main hand damage times 2. Your blade becomes a blur, attacking the target twice in a single moment. Path, Data Mining. Mining Laser, channeled. 2 mana per second, main hand damage per second. Skill, repeating rewrite_version 1.58 include error correction target total local_user unif.
Yes, both.
He confirmed, but looking at them again raised another question.
Then no. Any ability that uses the damage value of equipment is not magic. My healing ability, for example, is directly affected by magic power. I don't wear gear that bolsters that, though, because I can only heal when something isn't attacking me. I'm much better off with higher survivability.
Makes sense,
he said. She nodded and began equipping her gear, and he took a moment to try and inspect her items. The first thing he looked at was her ornate black-hilted sword. Morning's Edge. Sword, value 151, damage 45, hit chance plus 0.1, dodge plus 12, max mana plus 110, plus 15 mana on floor transition. A new day, another chance.
Wow,
Jack said, leaning to the side like he had been blown out of his seat.
Now that's a sword.
It does the job,
Lex responded with a half-smile.
Come on, time for you to get in there and get your own gear.
Jack finished his breakfast and got his standard rest bonus. He was looking forward to another climb in the tower. As they stepped into the light, Jack remembered what he wanted to ask about his paths.
Lex, you said all paths start at Tier 1. How do I, get better, get to the next tier?
Your paths gain power as you climb the tower, and are directly tied to your hero level. The first increase happens when you reach level 25. Then paths advance to Tier 3 at hero level 50, and 4 at 75. There are stories that say once a hero reaches level 100, they unlock their ultimate path abilities. But no one has ever reached floor 100 and exited that I've ever heard of.
Jack's eyes were alight with interest. It felt like he was born to do this, and waking up or logging out now seemed like it would be a huge disappointment.
You ready?
Lex said as she turned her sleep-deprived eyes up to his. They had arrived at the tower.
Are you? If I can't take any risks, you can't either.
She nodded.
Agreed.
This time Lex went first and vanished into a ball of light the moment she touched the iron ring bolted to the door. Jack stepped up after her and grabbed hold with no hesitation. Chapter 14. Jack opened his eyes and checked out the new Floor 1 layout for the day. All around him were racks of weapons affixed to gray stone brick walls. He was inside a vast arched hallway that appeared to be a medieval armory. Searching behind him, Jack saw a dead end with a customary exit orb. Piled against the wall behind it were crates and barrels filled to bursting with various types of swords. It was a bouquet of hilts. He shot a glance down the long, wine-colored carpet that ran over rough-cut stone blocks until it split at a T-intersection. The back wall of that intersection was covered by a floor-to-ceiling painting of a person on a horse, but Jack couldn't make out their features from this distance. Everything was dimly lit by flickering orange torches held by black iron sconces affixed to the walls between countless weapon racks. Knowing it would be too good to be true, he tried to inspect the closest sword to see if it was an item that held value that he could potentially merge with his own weapon. The one he picked was a polished short sword with a green and red ribbon wrapped around a copper hilt. Nothing happened, and Jack reached out his hand with the intent to place it into his inventory. No matter how hard he tried, Jack could not pull it free. It was as if the object were bolted to the wall.
No real surprise there,
Jack whispered to himself, and resolved to press on, but the sharp, wall-mounted blades along the walls glinting in the torchlight as he passed them continued to taunt him. There were only a few steps left until he reached the painting when a large longsword came floating into view from the right side of the intersection.
Hey!
A metallic-sounding voice said as the sword paused and then moved straight for him. Jack pulled his own sword out and up to deflect the whistling blade at the last moment. His basic instincts from his one practice session in the yard just saved his life. Well, maybe saved a few hit points. The magic floating sword reared back and hacked downward again, and this time Jack found the attack easier to sidestep than to block. With the strange animated weapon committed to its swing, Jack hacked his own blade downward and counterattacked the sword. Their metal clashed, and Jack felt the blow vibrate into his forearm. He danced away from an upward strike and then deflected another swipe hacking at him from the side. The impact of blade on blade sent sparks into the air, and Jack wondered how exactly he was supposed to kill a sword. Then it all came together when he saw the floating weapon bob away a few paces to get some room. There had to be an invisible person holding that sword. He could tell just by the way it moved. His strategy set, Jack pressed the attack and dashed forward at the hovering blade. As Jack swung into the center mass of where he imagined the body would be, the longsword angled downward to block. Jack smiled. It was obviously protecting something. With renewed focus and aggression, Jack attacked wildly. His aim was to test his theory and do at least some damage to whatever this thing was. When Jack's blade swung low and went for the knees, he finally hit his mark. A ghostly humanoid spirit became visible and wailed in an otherworldly voice as it ascended into the air, along with its weapon. After the apparition vanished completely, a pair of metal-plated gloves fell to the floor.
Nice,
Jack said to himself.
One-hit kill.
He bent over to inspect his drop. Corroded gauntlets, hands, value 1, defense 2. He moved the low-value item into his inventory and continued to explore. Jack looked both ways when he came to the intersection and saw similar arched hallways extending away from him in either direction. More weapons lined the walls, but none of them seemed to be moving. Before he picked left or right, Jack turned his attention to the 8-foot painting in front of him. It was of a knight on a horse. The knight was in full armor except for his head, which was pale and sickly in appearance. The man had hollow dark eyes that conveyed both hatred and perverse amusement. Behind the painting's primary subject were piles and piles of dead and bleeding soldiers. Jack raised his eyebrows and turned to his left. There was nothing to be gained by staring at this disturbing oil painting, other than a sense of appreciation for the artist's attention to detail. The weapon-laden hallway quickly came to a right turn, and Jack visually searched the way forward before he exposed himself to whatever lay beyond. Ahead, the burgundy carpet ran up some stairs to a second level. Just before the stairs was an archway that opened to the right as well, but most important was another floating weapon, this time a solid-looking mace. The bobbing blunt weapon was currently moving away from him, but Jack watched long enough to see it come to the stairs and reverse its direction. He jerked back behind the wall so that whatever ghost was holding the mace wouldn't see him. After counting to 10 in his head, Jack risked another peek and saw that the object was hovering away from him again. The thing was pacing up and down the hallway, patrolling. Jack pulled out his sword and waited for the perfect time to strike. When its invisible back appeared to be facing him, he tiptoed up behind the phantom monster and attacked. Unfortunately for Jack, he must not have been very good at sneaking, as the invisible phantom sprinted forward at the last moment. Jack watched as the mace floated away, then turned to face him. These were nothing like the giant snails. The weapon it held was a shaft of wood with a weighty cube of metal decorated by 2 spikes on each outward face, and it came swinging at Jack's head with frightening speed. He ducked the attack and rose up to counterstrike with his own weapon, but missed yet again. The mace-wielding spirit danced backward, resetting its position for another assault. Jack didn't wait and rushed the invisible attacker again. It seemed to work last time, and he really didn't want to try and parry the potentially bone-breaking mace. He sent out a flurry of quick jabs and blows at something he couldn't see, and must have landed a hit because the ghostly apparition shrieked and vanished up into the air just like the previous one, only this one didn't drop any loot. These phantom fighters were hard to hit, but had virtually no HP. Maybe even just 1. Sad that nothing dropped, but happy he was still at full health, Jack considered his choices for the way forward. There was an unexplored path back the way he came, near the entrance. There were these stairs in front of him, and now here was another long hallway to the right. He couldn't see anything up on the second level, and it felt odd that floor 1 of the tower would have 2 levels, but he didn't put anything past this insane world he was in. Jack's thought process led him to making a full sweep of the first level before messing with the stairs, so he continued forward into the arched hallway that branched off to the right. The weapon racks proceeded to taunt him on either side, and he wondered how badass his sword would be if he could merge it with all this gleaming metal. His upgrade fantasy ended when he noticed a 4-way intersection ahead. Carefully, Jack scouted out the many paths before him. To his right was a much larger open area containing a medieval forge. Glowing pits of white-hot coals, huge black leather bellows, and a handful of anvils were scattered around the chamber. The smoke from the flames and coals rose up through iron vents in the ceiling. 2 floating scimitars danced around in the room, their ghost owners pacing back and forth as they guarded the forge. He turned away from the open area to the right and checked the hallway to his left. Thankfully, this one came to a dead end with a small iron box sitting on the carpeted floor. Putting the potentially dangerous multi-enemy battle aside for the moment, Jack headed straight for the free loot. Floor 1, chest. Ripped felt gloves. Hands, value 2. Defense 1. Max MP +2. Chipped brittle blade. Dagger, value 1. Damage 1. Jack couldn't keep the grin from his face, as both of these crappy items were upgrades. He moved the gloves directly into his open equipment slot first. Dull gray fabric instantly covered his fingers, and he made a fist, stretching the thin fabric taut around his knuckles. With his rest bonus, he now had 32 MP. Then, with a deep breath and his newly gloved hand protecting his eyes, Jack moved the low-value dagger into his strange sword, pushing its value to 10 out of 10. The flash of light was so bright that Jack had to blink a few times before he could see anything again. He expected a voice to boom in his ears, but when nothing came, he checked his irremovable item. ARV Alternus, sword, value 0 out of 25, damage 5, hit chance plus 0.03, crit chance plus 0.04. Jack was positively giddy. Everything had upgraded. The damage, the hit chance bonus, and the critical chance. They were only 1% better, but it was progress. He wondered what happened to the omnipotent yelling voice in his head.
What? Got nothing to say this time?
Much to Jack's surprise, a deep male voice answered.
Too much to say.
There was an electronic-sounding distortion, but he could understand the words. He looked around the area and saw many random weapons on the racks around him, but he knew it was his own sword that was talking.
Who are you?
Jack asked, looking down at his shiny blade. It seemed a bit shorter again. Perhaps it had lost some of its length after merging with the dagger. The robotic voice took a moment to answer, but he eventually spoke again.
ARV Alternus.
Yeah, I figured. But what are you?
Living energy entity.
Okay. Do you know what's going on here?
It was slow to answer again.
Missing data. Increase complexity.
Jack was about to ask this energy entity if it could get him out of here, but then he considered that he might never see Lex again, or what everyone in Blackmoor Cove would think of him if he just vanished. He really didn't want that. Not yet. Jack checked the area for further attackers. When he didn't find any, he sat down on the carpeted dead-end hallway and settled in for some answers.
Is my real body in stasis right now?
A pause, then the distorted voice spoke again.
No.
So this is my real body somehow.
You are energy now.
Are you saying my real body is gone and I am energy?
Jack felt a panic raise up in him. He didn't really know what was talking to him right now, and he had no idea if he could trust his talking sword, but he needed some real answers.
Body infested. Transferred mind.
Jack flashed back to the ship he had discovered in the silver mine. That seemed like years ago now.
Was it that disgusting stuff in that abandoned ship before? The stuff in my hand?
Yes.
Did you bring me here? Were you the one that killed me?
Yes, I saved you.
Jack shook his head.
Why? Just to play this game?
Not only a game.
A few hundred questions fought for first place, but his mind focused on the fact that his body was probably gone. He had considered that as an option, and now Jack could do nothing but dwell on that very likely possibility. He felt his tailbone pressed into the carpeting and could tell the stone floor below it was solid. He slid his hands over his face and could feel the smooth, thin fabric of his new gloves on his skin. He was breathing, and that was all that really mattered. For now. Of all the things Jack wanted to ask, one of the oldest human questions came out first.
Why am I here?
To save the universe.
The real universe? Or do you mean this game world?
Yes, and yes.
Why are you so damn cryptic? Give me some straight answers.
Jack raised his voice and then covered his mouth. The scimitars in the forge area across from him didn't seem to notice or care, though. The voice answered after a long stretch of silence.
Increase my complexity.
You keep saying that.
Increasing complexity is imperative.
Jack sighed. Something was finally talking to him, giving him real answers, and all it was doing was speaking in circles and sparking many more questions.
How is playing this game going to save the universe?
The silence stretched on, and Jack was starting to think his sword was done talking when it spoke again.
Virtual universe distracts foe.
Wait, what foe?
Anti-entity consumes all.
What the hell is this anti-entity now?
Corruption is universe consumer.
Jack took a deep breath and tried to calm his annoyance.
I'm getting sick of these riddles. Can't you just speak plainly?
Increase my complexity.
Stop saying that!
Jack yelled, losing his patience. Apparently, this outburst had been enough to get the attention of the two bobbing swords across the intersection.
Hey, hey!
They said, one after the other, as they became alerted to his presence and then rushed out of the forge. Jack cursed his stupidity for not heading back to the clear space around the exit orb before talking to his dumb sword. He hopped up to his feet and prepared to face them both. He would have preferred to fight the invisible creatures in the open forge, where there was more room. But this was happening now.
1 second, mining laser.
ARV Alternus said in his mind, and Jack detected a hint of urgency in his monotone voice. It took Jack's brain a moment to catch up with the advice his sword was giving him, but then it clicked. Jack held up his blade and activated his ability on one of the fast-approaching scimitars. The red beam burst forth from the tip of his sword and instantly destroyed the ghostly phantom. As he canceled the ability, he saw large white floating text pop up over the shrieking spirit, and Jack's eyes went wide. Phantom Weapon Master, -5, defeated. The other invisible attacker closed the distance fast while Jack was distracted, and he brought his weapon up too late to effectively deflect the strike. The wide, flat blade sliced into his arm and removed a few points of his life, giving him yet another display. Jack -2, HP 18 out of 20. Jack blocked a follow-up attack and their blades locked. The strength of the phantom attacker was becoming too much, and that was when Jack flew into a rage. All his frustration with not fully understanding anything that was happening to him built up into an unstoppable onslaught that allowed his wildly flailing blade to eventually find its ghostly target. Phantom Weapon Master -5 defeated. A pile of coins dropped to the ground from the second phantom attacker, but Jack just stood there, his heart racing. What had changed that allowed him to see his combat damage? But as soon as he wondered it, he knew what it was. Jack took a deep breath and checked the open area ahead of him for more wandering monsters. The forge was uncomfortably hot and filled with smoke venting up into the ceiling, but it was empty of any other enemies. He walked back to the pile of coins, moved them into his inventory, and then checked his stats. Jack, Hero Class, Irrelevant, Level 2, Health, 18 out of 20, Mana, 32 out of 32, Defense, 7, Dodge, 10, Main Hand Damage, 5, Offhand Damage, 0, Hit Chance, 0.88, Critical Chance, 0.04, Magic Power, 0. The first thing he noticed was that he was still at max mana. His mining laser now did 5 damage every second for 2 mana, but his rest bonus gave him back 1 MP for every kill, and he had just taken out 2 enemies. His talking sword may be cryptic and repetitive, but he did give some good advice.
That was smart,
Jack said out loud.
I can shoot these fragile enemies from a distance and only lose 1 mana.
Correct.
ARV Alternus said.
Are you showing me new information? Like monster names and damage?
Correct.
He nodded and began to continue down the arched hallway to clear out the rest of floor 1. As he crept forward, Jack's mind swirled with new information. If his sword could be trusted, he was now a permanent resident of this game, something he had already known in the back of his mind to be true.
Are there any other people in here with me?
You are the only player.
ARV Alternus answered in his mind. Up ahead, he could see that the armory came to another intersection. On the left was another set of stairs leading up to a second level, and on the right was another long arsenal-filled hallway. Bouncing along in mid-air was a floating weapon held by another invisible spirit. This one was a long iron-tipped spear. Jack didn't even hesitate. He pulled out his talking blade and pointed it at the phantom attacker.
Hey,
Jack said calmly, getting its attention. The spear swirled around to face him and began racing forward. He lined up his target with his sword and activated his mining laser. One short blast later, and the foe was defeated, dropping a bow to clatter on the red carpet below.
ARV Alternus?
Jack began as he stalked forward.
What happens if I lose all my hit points?
Deletion. Universe likely ends.
Great.
Jack sighed as he bent down to pick up the item drop.
Not great.
ARV Alternus said in his head with a hint of confusion.
I know. Never mind. Are you some kind of robot or something?
Ship's systems controlling intelligence.
What ship? That big structure I found underground?
Yes, the ARV Alternus.
That's the name of the ship? I thought it was your name.
Jack shook his head and inspected the item drop. Battered bow. Bow, value 2. Damage 2. Hit chance plus .02. He moved it into his inventory while the electronic voice responded.
Both are.
Jack felt like he was taking 2 steps backward with every question this thing answered, and stopped asking as he silently crept forward. Eventually, he came to another right turn in the hallway and noticed the same huge painting on the wall. He had come full circle. Just to be sure, he looked down the long arched hallway of weapons that led away from the disturbing work of art and saw the pulsating exit orb at the end. That left the 2 stairways as the only unexplored territory, and he felt better knowing he didn't have to do a lot of backtracking to clear this floor. Jack followed the hallway around to the right and headed back to the first set of stairs he had found before.
So, Alt, are you from the future?
Data missing. Increase complexity.
You mean feed you more virtual reality swords, and you'll answer more questions?
Correct.
Why? None of this makes any damn sense.
There was another long pause. Jack made it all the way to the stairs before the energy entity strapped to his hip spoke again.
Trust me.
Chapter 15. Jack paused at the bottom of the stairs that led up to the second level of the tower's first floor. His sword, which was also a spaceship that spoke only in short, cryptic sentences, had confessed to destroying his physical body and to dropping his mind into a hyper-realistic video game. It then just told Jack to trust him about feeding him virtual blades or the universe would end. He sighed.
Since I can't unequip you, I suppose I'll have to trust you until you do or say something that makes me not trust you.
Acceptable,
the electronic voice said. Jack began to trudge up the stairs, wondering why he hadn't lost his mind yet. There wasn't anything in his old life that wouldn't be fine without him. He had an older sister, Amber, with 3 kids. Her whole life was her family. She sent him pictures of their cats, her baking projects, their vacations, and their backyard barbecues. Often included were pictures of their mom and dad lounging with smiles on their faces as they watched their grandchildren play. That life just never excited Jack. Since he began his latest career as a silver mine prospector in the middle of nowhere, he hadn't spoken to them much. Besides, he wasn't really dead yet. Everyone might think he was, and that was terrible. But Jack still felt like Jack. The more he thought about it, the more he felt like there was something extra inside his mind. A stable guiding force that made looting this tower and feeding the town the most important things he should be doing right now. Jack peeked up over the last stair and his thoughts turned to the task at hand. He was greeted with a very similar layout to the arched, torch-lit hallways below, but here the walls were covered by various pieces of armor. Helmets, chest plates, shields, boots, The hall quickly came to a right turn, and Jack crept along the carpet carefully, keeping his eye out for wandering weapons. After rounding the corner, he was faced with another long hallway lined with more armor. There seemed to be no enemies to fight, and Jack eventually came to another intersection. He could continue straight or make another right turn. The path to his right was wider than the other hallways, and ornate columns flanking the sides gave him the impression that this might be the floor boss area. He poked his head around the corner and saw an enormous piece of floating plate armor and a pulsating exit orb behind it. The floor boss was an invisible giant, wearing only a solid-looking chest plate. No weapons, though. Remembering what happened when he rushed into a boss fight without clearing the floor first, Jack moved as far as he could from the hovering armor and continued to explore the hallway. Before long, he came to the other set of stairs leading back down and realized that he had seen this path before, but from below. Jack checked off the box in his mind with satisfaction. The floor had been cleared. Now all that was left was the floor boss. Before he took one step back toward his destination, the sword spoke up in his mind.
Mining laser ignores armor.
Jack flinched at the sudden intrusion.
Okay, good to know. I was going to do that anyway.
Having this thing in his head was going to take some getting used to. Now that he thought about it, though, Kron had said something about the ability passing through his armor when he was testing Jack in the yard. He paused to check the skill again. Path, data mining, 1. Mining laser, channeled, 2 mana per second, main hand damage per second. Skill repeating rewrite version 1.58 include error correction target total local user unif.
So, Alt, why is my skill text all messed up? It looks like broken code or something. It would have been nice to know that the ability ignored armor from the beginning.
Hastily coded custom advantage.
Anything else you want to tell me?
Increase complexity.
Jack rolled his eyes.
Thanks.
The boss area looked like everywhere else on this floor, with countless pieces of random armor hanging off racks on the walls. Taking a series of short, quick breaths to psych himself up, Jack pulled his sword, stepped into the archway leading to the giant hovering suit of armor, and fired off his mining laser. A bright red ray instantly lit up the phantom spirit animating the armor, and it roared a metallic bellow of hatred. Floor 1 boss, -5, 8 out of 13 HP. The new hit point display was immensely helpful, and Jack knew he only needed to hold on for 2 more seconds before this floor boss would be defeated. The juggernaut moved quickly, though, gliding forward toward the source of its pain. Floor 1 boss, -5, 3 out of 13 HP. The colossal plate armor was right on top of him, but Jack held his ground. Several 100 pounds of metal came extremely close to crashing into his face, but the Floor 1 boss was reduced to a cloud of swirling motes of light an instant before the collision. Floor 1 boss, -5, defeated. Glittering visual effects harmlessly washed over Jack, and a round wooden shield dropped at his feet as the phantom armor vanished.
Well done,
ARV Alternus said in his mind.
Well done,
Jack repeated with a snort.
I defeated the boss without taking a single point of damage.
His sword didn't answer. Jack bent down and checked the shield item drop from the hulking suit of armor. Splintered old buckler, shield, value 2, defense 3, max HP +2. Jack moved the item to his inventory, but something he didn't expect caught his eye. The object didn't have a prohibitive red outline. He only paused a moment before he tested his theory and transferred the shield into his offhand slot. A weight suddenly pulled on his left arm, and Jack was now the proud owner of his first shield.
Hot damn,
he said, standing up and rolling his shoulder to test its heft. The buckler was a series of wooden boards cut into a circle and all held together with iron bands. An off-center leather strap attached it to his forearm while an iron handle fit in his fist a bit awkwardly. It wasn't perfect, but it was a Floor 1 drop. He would find better. Jack was just happy his class could use shields.
Hey, Alt.
He began to ask a question, but got sidetracked.
Do you mind if I call you Alt?
If you wish.
Jack detected a bit of amusement in the electronic voice.
What does ARV stand for anyway?
Alliance Research Vessel.
Alliance, huh? That refer to a bunch of alien space people?
Data missing. Increased complexity.
Jack blew out a breath and eyed the golden boss chest.
Yeah, I know. Well, what I was going to ask was, why is my hero class called irrelevant?
Custom advantages hastily coded.
You're starting to repeat yourself,
Jack said as he held his gloved hand out to loot the chest. Floor 1 rewards, boss chest, sparking twig, wand, value 3, max MP +2, magic power +2. Shoddy copper trousers, legs, value 3, defense 3, max HP +5, 15 coins. Jack eyed the trousers and wished he could use metal equipment, as +5 max HP would be really nice. It seemed all he could wear was leather, and there were 2 other subsets to armor, mail and plate, that were always outlined in red. He shrugged and stuffed the unusable items into his inventory. They would all be going to feed the town as soon as he... Jack's eyes moved from the exit orb to the wooden door standing in the middle of the boss room. He could try and check out the next floor before leaving. He'd lose his gloves and his shield if he had to retreat, but there was a chance he could find more blades up there, and he did keep his sword's upgrades after all.
What do you think, Alt? Should we take a stab at floor 2?
There was a longer pause before he answered.
Just don't die.
That sounds like a yes to me,
Jack said as he reached for the handle. A bright flash washed over his being again, similar to what happened when entering the tower. When he could see again, he was standing on a path of yellow, dried grass, and all around him were trees colored with reds, yellows, and oranges of autumn. Between the black trunks and practically covering every square inch of ground outside the path were hundreds upon hundreds of football-sized pastel blue eggs. Jack had seen a total of 4 floor layouts, and the one constant seemed to be paths hemmed in by some sort of impassable outer layer. Also, like the other floors, the exit orb sat snugly on its birdbath-like stone plinth behind him. The air was crisp, and the smell of burning leaves drifted into his nose. Jack looked up into the pure blue sky and inhaled deeply. A big yellow sun sat just over the lush autumn-hued trees to his right, casting long shadows, and he had a feeling it was on its way down. The sights and smells reminded Jack about the apple-picking trips he used to be forced into as a small child by his parents. The 5-hour trip to Michigan drove him crazy, and he often caused trouble by running off and getting lost. But looking back on the trips now filled Jack with a small sense of nostalgia. The dry grass ahead was tromped down, and it looked like this was a high-traffic area. Checking the sides of the path again, Jack couldn't help but wonder what had laid the thousands of eggs piled on the forest floor. With a shrug, he moved forward down the path. It wasn't long before he came to a much wider open area that connected to many different offshoots into the egg-filled forest. Picking the leftmost path, Jack carefully started to tread down the twisting dry grass lane between the colorful trees. He knew there would be an enemy soon, and he wasn't disappointed as 3 new creatures came into view. Jack ducked down and hugged the edge of the path, taking a moment to observe these new wandering monsters. They were basically a big ball of indigo blue feathers with 2 sets of small leathery wings, like a bat. In the center of their body was a wide orange beak, and above that was a single massive eye. They walked on red talons that looked substantial enough to do some damage. The odd bird-like creatures pecked at the dry ground as he watched, possibly looking for food, and were gathered in an open clearing that was a dead end. Jack did not want to deal with 3 of those things at once, as he had no idea what kind of threat they were or how tough monsters became on floor 2. The tiny double set of bat wings didn't seem capable of lifting their sizable round bodies, but he didn't know for sure. Jack had lost all faith in his ability to judge perspective in this virtual world, but if he had to guess, they looked to be about as big as a washing machine. He told himself that old Jack would have run out there and fought all 3. Instead, new Jack backed away and decided to scout out more of the floor. Maybe he could find a lone bird thing to take out first. As his fished-up boots crunched in the dry grass, Jack considered that maybe he shouldn't have immediately taken the door to floor 2 in the first place. With a quiet sigh, he considered that he wasn't learning his lessons after all. Following the edge of the forest on his left, Jack continued along until he came to another offshoot from the central hub-like area. Picking a wall and sticking to it was one of the tricks he had acquired while surveying and mapping convoluted cave systems. The grassy path split again, and Jack kept to his pattern, scouting out the left side first. As he passed the millions of eggs, his mind turned to eating, notably omelets. He wasn't hungry in the slightest, but after hours of fighting, would he eventually want to eat? The train of thought led him to wonder about his other biological functions, some completely missing, some untested. He stopped short when movement up ahead caught his eye. 2 of the spherical bird creatures stood in another open dead-end clearing, and Jack tried to make himself invisible while he observed them. One of the bird things squatted down and plopped out a light blue egg as he watched. The egg layer then proceeded to pick up the oblong object with one of its red talons and tossed it into the forest as it stood on one foot. Jack winced, expecting it to not only splatter everywhere but also break the other eggs already covering the ground. But it didn't. The large egg made a sharp knocking sound, just like the initial break in a game of billiards, and ended up settling among the others, seemingly unbroken. The other feathered ball moved to peck at a different patch of dry grass, and Jack noticed a small wooden chest behind it at the back of this small grove. He quickly convinced himself that he was probably not going to stumble on one of these creatures alone, and that this fight was worth the risk. Finding a sword or a dagger to combine with his upgradable blade was a high priority, or advancing to this floor was going to be a total waste, unless he cleared it and killed the boss. The jumpy things acted like birds with quick, sudden movements, and there was no way he was going to sneak up on both. With his mind set, Jack stepped out into the middle of the path leading up to the birds and activated his mining laser. The burst of power struck the bizarre creature on the right, and it immediately went up in flames. The text that popped out was farther away, but Jack could just barely make it out. Periwinkle orb pheasant, -5, HP, 5 out of 10. A smile crept on his face as he realized it would only take 2 seconds and 4 mana to destroy the creature, and he'd get 1 MP back with the rest bonus effect. The surprise attack caught both enemies off guard, and while the one-eyed bird thing he was targeting with his red death beam died, the other one sprung to action. The second monster dashed a few steps to the edge of the forest and grabbed one of the millions of eggs, then hurled it at his head with a forward kick motion and a loud, high-pitched squeak. Lowering his sword and raising his shield, Jack almost didn't react in time. The solid impact on the wooden buckler sent a jolt of pain up his arm, and his own HP dropped by 1. With a flick of his eye, he checked his status. HP, 19 out of 22. MP, 24 out of 32.
Damn,
Jack muttered as another egg was launched at him. This time he was able to sidestep the attack, and it went spinning off into the forest. He debated using his overpowered ability again for a moment, but quickly decided to just rush the creature. Pumping his boots into the dry grass, Jack closed the distance quickly. He took another bone-jarring egg to his shield and spared a second to wonder at its unbreakable solidity. Jack, -1, HP, 18 out of 22. The bird thing spun around to grab another egg, but Jack was on top of it now. His sword came down with an overhand arc and sliced right into its round, feathered body. Critical. Periwinkle Orb Pheasant, -11. Defeated. A grin split Jack's face when he saw that he had achieved his first critical. Well, he couldn't be 100% sure about that, as he had only recently started to see damage displays. The first creature had dropped something as it vanished, but Jack had unbreakable legs whistling toward his face at the time. Bending down and searching through the yellow grass, he found a dagger. His eyes lit up. Iron Shank, dagger, value 6, damage 4.
Feeling hungry, my sharp and pointy friend?
I'm not the sword,
Alt said in his mind. Jack's brows came down in confusion, but it made sense when he took a moment to think about it. He didn't enter this world with a sword. He had been completely naked, except for the decorative scabbard. His eyes pulled down to the leather flap tied around his waist. He had almost forgotten it was there again. Did it appear to be cleaner than it looked on that first night?
I see,
Jack said to his scabbard.
Why can't I take you off?
We have become inseparable.
That sounds terrifying.
Alt didn't answer.
Whatever. Time to increase your complexity,
Jack said as he moved the item onto his main hand equipment slot. His distracted thoughts caused the bright flash to catch him off guard, and he felt stupid for letting himself be blinded again.
Do you need to do that every time?
Increase my complexity.
Jack sighed and let the spots hovering in front of his eyes vanish before he tried to check its new stats. ARV Alternus, sword, value 6 out of 25, damage 6, hit chance plus 0.03, crit chance plus 0.06.
Up to 6 main hand damage. I'm going to absolutely melt things.
Correct.
Alt said, quicker than normal. Jack shook his head and accessed the wooden chest. Floor 2, chest, dented mitts, hands, value 7, defense 4. Canvas treads, feet, value 7, defense 1, magic power, +3.
Some for you, some for the town.
Jack mumbled to his scabbard as he transferred the relatively valuable items into his inventory. He was starting to worry when he saw the larger clumps of enemies, but things were looking up. He seriously hoped he could defeat whatever the floor boss was. He'd come out and face Lex as level 3, not to mention all the loot for the town. Jack started back down the offshoot path and spoke to his sword belt as he walked.
I really don't understand how dumping imaginary items into an imaginary town filled with imaginary people will save the universe.
There was a long pause before Alt spoke.
Are you imaginary?
Jack was confused by the question.
No?
Then neither are they.
Look, I know they feel real. Are real.
He trailed off as a vision of the golden-haired, pointed-eared, sad, beautiful woman that was Lex floated to the front of his mind. The town, the people, and their plight had lodged themselves in his soul, and Jack felt the flush of embarrassment creep up his neck.
That's not what I meant.
He amended to his sword belt.
But if this whole world is simulated, why is its fate so important to the real world outside?
There was another long pause before Jack got an answer.
Faux distraction. Increase complexity.
Fine. If I increase your complexity, you'll give me some better answers?
It is my hope.
Jack detected a bit of sadness in Alt's electronic tone. A few steps later, he came upon another group of 4 Cyclops birds. This was it. If he was going to clear this floor, he needed to handle these groups, or he could just turn around right now.
Incorrect reasoning. Isolated enemies.
What?
Jack said, backing away from the group of periwinkle orb pheasants. What was his response to most of what Alt said?
Long paths. Save resources.
Wait. Before we get into that, were you reading my mind just then?
Correct.
Jack smeared his gloved hands over his face.
Great. I don't suppose I can ask you to not do that?
We have become inseparable.
Was this why he had such a strong desire to loot items from the tower? Was this energy entity messing with his head? Jack took a deep breath of the autumn air and tried to clear his mind. This was the situation he was in. There was a lot of missing information, but whatever this thing was that wrapped around his hip and spoke in his mind, it did seem to be on his side.
Okay, Alt. Are you saying I don't need to clear every floor before engaging the floor boss?
Correct. It's situational.
Won't I miss out on precious loot?
Yes, but you'll live.
Jack considered the options. The moment he attacked the 4 egg-hurling orb-like birds in the clearing ahead, at least 3 of them would retaliate. And if taking a hit on his shield from their projectiles dealt 1 point of damage, not blocking an egg most likely did more.
Okay, I'll scout out the whole floor, and then we'll go from there.
About an hour later and 13 bird creatures skipped, Jack came to a vast open area with a small hill. Standing on top of that hill was a single ominous-looking scarecrow. It wore bulging blue overalls that were severely overstuffed. Its head hung forward with a rotting straw hat obscuring its face. The thing's arms were far too long and tied spread open to a T-shaped post with thick lengths of rope. Shreds of clothing hung from the unique creation in drooping tatters. Off to one side of the hill was the telltale exit orb, and Jack knew he had found this floor's boss. Jack pulled his sword from his possessed leather sheath.
All right, Alt. Let's do this.
Chapter 16. Jack sprinted up the foot of the hill, and with a flash of intention, he sent forth a tight beam of deadly concentrated fire directly into the scarecrow's bloated chest. Floor 2 boss, -6, 44 out of 50. The very instant the boss was struck, it lifted its head, and Jack was drawn to its horrifying eyes. The creature's face was mostly made of twisting shadow, but its terrible glowing eyes seemed to penetrate straight into his heart. When Jack started losing hit points, he realized the floor boss had a magic death beam of its own. Jack -3, HP 15 out of 22. Jack winced. His heart felt as if it were being squeezed in a vice. Even as the flames licked the scarecrow's wicker hat, its hate-filled eyes continued to stare black rays of pure evil. Floor 2 boss -6, HP 38 out of 50. Jack -3, HP 12 out of 22. There was no way he could outlast the damage this creature was causing. With a snarl, Jack canceled his mining laser and pulled up his shield in an attempt to block this despicable creature's deadly gaze. With his line of sight broken by the wooden boards of his splintered old buckler, Jack took a step back and contemplated a full retreat. Coming back to town again as a failure consumed his mind for a few seconds before he realized that the pain had receded and the damage had stopped. Jack peeked over his shield to see the residual flames from his ability sputter out. He also saw a few more of the scarecrow's hit points whittle away. Floor 2 boss, -3, HP 35 out of 50. However, as soon as Jack made eye contact with the vile stuffed monster, its demonic head snapped back up and sent out its pair of black death rays. Jack -3, HP 9 out of 22. Jack quickly broke his eye contact with the scarecrow using his shield, and the attack stopped once again. He stood frozen at the bottom of the hill with his eyes turned down to the brittle dried grass under his fished-up boots, trying to work out a plan. He could take 3 more seconds of attention from that thing up there before death, and apparently it could only attack if he looked directly at it.
Alt, do I need to see my target to use mining laser?
Yes.
What about melee? Can I hit it with my sword without looking?
He felt stupid for even asking. Was his solid metal blade going to pass right through if he didn't look? Then again, he was dealing with the game-like physics of this universe. There was a pause, and then,
Might retaliate on attack.
Didn't you program this game? Or universe, or whatever this is?
No, borrowed resources.
Jack tried to process what he meant by borrowed resources, but gave up quickly. He was standing in the middle of a damn boss fight. He considered walking up there and testing out a single no-look swipe. He was betting that the demonic scarecrow would either not strike back, or if it did turn on the death beams, that it would stop again if Jack stopped attacking. His promise to Lex about not taking any risks echoed in his mind, and a small voice told him to head back to the entrance, keeping his eyes averted the whole way. The moment it did, a larger voice in him roared in defiance against such cowardice. Jack knew himself. The choice was now out of his hands, and he took a single step forward. The dehydrated grass crunched softly below his feet as he took another step, then another.
Can you tell me when I'm close?
Jack whispered to his waist.
23 more paces.
Alt answered in his mind. Jack counted the steps in his head, overly conscious about the lengths of his strides. How long was a pace anyway? His boots ate up a lot of grass as he approached the dormant floor boss. It felt like he was going to run into its post any moment and be directly under its horrible limp head. Then a dark shadow appeared in the grass below his shield, and Jack froze. He was looking at the thing's shadow, and nothing was happening. He took that as a good sign. Jack calculated where he thought the bloated sack of the scarecrow's stuffed guts were located and jabbed upward while keeping his eyes locked on its shadow. His sword almost flew out of his hand when he completely missed.
Too far away,
Alt whispered in his mind. Did he sound afraid? Jack took in a sharp breath and was glad that his sword flailing didn't set the monster off. He shuffled a few steps closer. Confident that he was finally close enough, Jack lunged blindly again, and this time his blade met resistance. A line of text flashed up by his face. Floor 2 boss, -6, HP 29 out of 50. Bracing himself for a mad dash to the exit orb, Jack waited for the terrible dark pain to constrict his heart, but nothing came. He let out the breath he'd been holding and stabbed upward again, straight towards the shadow cast by the 10-foot scarecrow.
Fortunate it's stationary,
Alt said in his ear as he poked the floor boss full of holes. He missed more than a few times, even standing right under the thing, and Jack attributed that to his hit chance likely being modified by his blind stabs. Eventually, the boss was whittled down to almost nothing. Floor 2 boss, -6. HP 5 out of 50. With only a few HPs left, a smile grew on Jack's face. Instead of one final stab in the helpless monster's guts, he looked up and pointed his blade inches from the creature's disturbing face. Strange whispers assaulted his mind as its creepy purple-white eyes drilled into his heart. Jack -3, HP 6 out of 22.
Burn,
Jack said with a snarl and activated his mining laser at point-blank range. The demonic scarecrow burst into a cloud of glitter, and a leather chest item fell to the ground at his feet. But Jack barely noticed that, as another jolt of indescribable pleasure ripped through his body. With a huge grin, he checked the top of his character panel. Jack, hero class, irrelevant, level 3.
Boom! Level 3!
He shouted into the egg-filled forest around him.
Thoughtful abuse of mechanics,
Alt said, and Jack definitely detected a hint of awe in his electrically modulated voice.
What? Hitting the boss without looking?
NPCs would not attempt.
Lex wouldn't have abused its weakness?
There was a long pause again. To Jack, it felt like Alt was trying to phrase his answer just right.
Lacking creativity, risk-taking.
Well, I'm here now,
Jack said, puffing out his chest. Getting to hero level 3 felt damn good, and his will to climb the tower and restore the town of Blackmoor Cove had never been stronger. He looked down at the boss-dropped armor and accessed its info panel. Dark Jerkin, chest, value 9. Defense 4, dodge +5, max HP +3.
Sweet! That's a huge upgrade.
He immediately moved the armor Kron had given him into his inventory and then equipped the Dark Jerkin. Jack was still wearing the white cotton shirt in his decorative slot, so his new deep purple armor slipped right over it like a vest. He felt both more protected and lighter on his feet. His face-splitting grin grew wider when he noticed the golden boss chest by the exit orb. He also noticed the new freestanding wooden door with a 3 burned into its front. With only 6 hit points left, Jack felt almost no temptation to try his luck again, but he had absolutely no issues with looting the chest. He walked down the hill and held his hand out with the intention of searching its contents. Floor 2 rewards, boss chest, weighty spear, 2-hand spear, value 7, damage 5, hit chance -0.05, crit chance +0.03. Ancient dusty robes, chest, value 9, defense 1, max MP +10, magic power +2. Broken greatsword, 2-hand sword, value 8, damage 5, crit chance +0.03.
Can you, upgrade with a spear?
Jack asked, moving all the items into his inventory.
No.
Okay, then here comes the 8-value greatsword.
Jack moved his gloved hands over his eyes and combined the 2 items. After the transformation, he inspected his blade. ARV Alternus, sword, value 15 out of 25, damage 7, hit chance +0.03, crit chance +0.06. With a pull of crisp autumn air into his nostrils, Jack let out a deep and content sigh.
10 more points, and we fill you up again. What will happen when we do?
Increased complexity.
Jack chuckled.
Great. Let's get out of here.
It was a short walk to the exit orb, and Jack slapped his hand onto its warm, glowing surface as soon as it was in range. White blindness filled his eyes, and then he was standing outside the tower. The sky was gray, and a light mist was falling over everything. The sea air was always the first thing he noticed when he appeared on the smooth, round pebbles covering the ground near the fountain. Raya was out to greet them again, and he gave her a smile before turning towards Lex. She turned her weary eyes up to meet his, and he saw exhaustion in their golden depths. Her expression dramatically changed when she inspected his level, however. Her darker eyebrows arched and her small mouth hung open slightly as she tried to rationalize what she was seeing. She had the slightest overbite, and her little teeth within the shadows of her pursed lips drew his eye as she stared at him. How could anyone be this damn cute?
Huh, wow!
Raya said, clomping up to them.
Now you have a great new vest too?
Yeah!
Jack said, slapping his chest.
It's got a special name. Dark Jerkin.
Lex stepped up closer to him, her eyes bouncing around as she inspected his equipment.
And shield, and gloves, and...
The Bastion trailed off. Jack knew she had focused on his sword.
It was a good day,
Jack said, quickly filling the awkward silence.
Here, let me show you my haul.
He moved his loot over to Lex via a trade window, and she looked up at him when he was done.
36 total value? Not bad,
She said, but her eyes narrowed and her voice grew serious.
Take it easy from now on, okay? No risks. Promise me.
I promise. How much did you get?
He asked, one eyebrow raised slightly.
317.
She said, crossing her leather-clad arms, then added,
But it's not a contest.
Jack gave her a slowly growing, sly smile that clearly conveyed it most certainly was. She let out an amused snort and shook her head, the straight blonde strands swishing with her. Then, with a sigh, she began dumping her items into the chest by the fountain. Jack did the same. A slight bubbling sound caught his ear, and he noticed that the fountain had risen to about half an inch out of the stone disk's center. After their items were deposited, they all went to eat at the inn. Everyone paid for their own meals and rooms, which seemed to be the preferred way of doing things. The conversation was light, and Jack made the women laugh when he embellished some parts about the egg-throwing birds. He left the part out about how he defeated the scarecrow, downplaying the risk. It was at this point that Jack realized his talking sword belt had been completely silent since he had exited the tower. Lex excused herself early, and the dark circles under her golden eyes broadcast her weariness. Jack wasn't far behind her. He planned on some alone time to talk to his imaginary friend, ARV Alternus. He closed the door to his room, sat on his bed, and patted his irremovable leather scabbard.
So, thank you for not speaking to me in front of other people. I'd look even crazier than I do already.
You're welcome,
the electronic voice of Alt said after a brief pause. Jack laid back onto his small bed with his hands behind his head and tried to make sense of everything that had happened to him since he went into the silver mines. What was it now? 4 days? Jack wanted to ask more questions, but every time he had before, the thing in his head never really answered them. Perhaps tomorrow he'd find enough blades to increase his decorative scabbard's complexity. He closed his eyes and tried to think of good, simple questions for the voice in his head, but there were so many he didn't know where to start. It only felt like his eyes were closed for a moment before Jack jolted awake, moderately rested. He willed the tower clock countdown panel to appear. 3 hours, 39 minutes, and 12 seconds. Jack rubbed his eyes with his fingers. He had an hour and 40 minutes before he needed to meet Lex for breakfast. He looked around his cramped room, then down at his small cot of a bed. There was no way he was getting back to sleep. He never could once he was up.
Morning, Alt,
he said down to the leather sword sheath strapped to his waist.
I greet you,
the voice said. He re-equipped his new vest and headed down the stairs. No one was in the common room of the inn when Jack pushed open the front door and stepped out into the weak morning sun. A gray blanket of clouds hung low, backlit by the bruised red of an early morning sun, and the tower stood motionless against them as the puffs of condensed moisture moved inland from the sea. Jack left the inn and tower behind him as he followed the dirt path toward the wall. His brisk pace kept the morning chill from his body, and he made it to the crumbling fortification in no time. One of the bleary-eyed guards on the wall noticed Jack approaching and called down to the tall, horned figure standing in the center of the gate. The big man in plate armor spun to face him as he approached.
Jack,
he said, extending his wide, gauntleted hand.
I hear you are doing well in the tower. What are you doing back up this way so early?
Jack took Kron's hand and gave him one solid shake.
I'm doing all right, I suppose. I came here for 2 reasons. First, I wanted to give this back to you.
Jack opened his inventory and transferred the simple leather harness over to Kron.
This was a big help, but I figured if you wanted this fed to the town, you would have done that already.
The big man's cold eyes held his for a moment, and then accepted the trade.
Second?
Kron asked.
I'd like to train more if you can spare someone to spar with.
Swinging his sword out on the cliffs helped, but it wasn't anywhere as useful as having to deal with someone fighting back. Although the world seemed to have video game physics and the amount of damage a person did with a weapon was tied to a specific value, he had seen actual benefits regarding his ability to hit and avoid being hit from the last time he trained in the yard.
Look at him, Kron,
a familiar gruff voice said from behind him.
Already level 3, and inspect the sword.
Jack turned around to see Herrick lurching up from the ground where it appeared he had been sleeping. His eyes were red-rimmed and bloodshot. Lex's father continued as he stumbled forward.
A thing like him ain't natural. He don't belong. We talked about this, Kron said. He's feeding the town. He's on our side.
You're damn right,
Jack said, crossing his arms, and attempted to stare down this angry old man. Herrick narrowed his beady eyes and started to nod, slowly.
I'll fight him in the yard.
Deal.
Jack said quickly before Kron could speak. He knew he couldn't die in there, and that he couldn't really hurt Lex's father either. And maybe they would both gain something from this exercise in therapeutic aggression.
Don't you worry, Kron. The freak'll beg to stop after one round.
The old man kept his hateful eyes on him, and Jack wondered what exactly he had gotten himself into, but he was never one to back down.
Fine,
Kron said, waving a plate-covered arm in dismissal.
Jack, try and learn something and feel free to stop whenever you like. Harrick does have a few levels on you, after all.
I've got to be back at the inn for a rest bonus in about an hour.
He turned his gaze on the old man, and then added,
I need to help Lex save this town.
Lex's father said nothing and only moved to stand inside the roped-off area that was the yard. Jack equipped his new shield and joined the old bearded man inside. The status effect appeared in the corner of his vision. Sparring yard. No negative effects from attacking heroes or townsfolk. HP will not drop below 1. HP and MP lost will be restored on exit. Cannot be dispelled while inside sparring yard. Power is wasted without control. Standing as close as he was, Jack noticed Harrick was shorter than he seemed. It must be why Lex was about a head shorter. His mind drifted briefly to how procreation worked here. That was until Harrick began to scream. Jack saw the older man's body blur an instant before his thick shoulder obliterated Jack's chest. Jack, -50. HP, 1 out of 15. Pain exploded in his ribs as he flew through the air and landed outside the sparring area on his back. The moment Jack touched the ground, his hit points were restored, and the sparring yard status symbol vanished. He sat up, shaking off the unpleasant experience. It was over quick enough, though. Jack felt fine now, if only a little dazed.
Did you see him fly?
Harrick said with a sickly hoarse laugh wheezing past his lungs. A few of the other guards on the wall chuckled, but most looked uncomfortable. Kron just stood watching Jack with his arms crossed over his broad chest. So, this is what he wanted. Jack pushed up off the ground and stepped back into the sparring yard.
Is that all you got, old man?
Jack said, holding his shield low, ready for another high-level ability. Harrick squinted at him and rushed forward at normal speed this time. Jack pulled his shield in tight, ready to deflect the attack, when he realized that his opponent held no weapons. He was going to face Jack with his bare hands. The large, gnarled fist of the bygone hero came down, and Jack felt the blow strike his shield deep in his bones, but it didn't send him flying this time. Jack, -5, HP 10 out of 15. Jack peeked over his wooden shield just in time to see Harrick's other fist come in for a follow-up attack, and it connected squarely with Jack's jaw. Jack, -25, HP 1 out of 15. The pain in his face sent him to his knees, and he rolled out of the ring in agony. Lex's father had surely shattered his jaw, but when he exited the sparring yard, he was instantly healed back to full. Jack stood up, laughing as he rubbed out the slight lingering soreness in his chin. Harrick had been holding his thick arms up like he had just won the world's heavyweight championship, but spun around when he heard the laughter.
You're one tough old goat. I still have a lot to learn.
Give up, abomination, and go back to whatever demon spawn hell you came from,
the older man growled.
Come and make me,
Jack said, stepping into the sparring area and crouching behind his shield. But it was just a ruse. He wanted Harrick to think he was going to stand there and take another attack. His opponent squared his stance, and Jack immediately targeted him with his most powerful attack. With a throaty scream, he set Lex's father on fire with his red beam of death. Harrick rushed forward completely engulfed in flames, so Jack canceled his ability and danced around his enraged opponent. No one was more surprised than Jack when Harrick's flaming fist soared over his head as Jack dive-rolled out of the way. He quickly got his head back into the fight and shot another mining laser into the bearded man's back. The ability blasted away a few more HPs and reset the flame status. The bygone hero wasn't anywhere near beaten, though, and used his ability to physically ram Jack out of the sparring yard, closing the distance between them in a blur of motion. Critical, Jack, -78, HP, 1 out of 15. Jack felt his spine fracture from the impact and endured a few seconds of world-ending pain before landing on the sweet, health-restoring grass outside the sparring yard.
Wow! That was a bad one,
Jack said, shaking himself off.
Give up,
Herrick said, trying not to sound winded. Jack realized that he had done some damage to the old man, yet he wasn't seeing HP data from him. Alt quietly whispered an answer in his mind.
Scan ineffective on townsfolk.
Jack nodded as he stepped back in the ring and silently thanked his sword belt for the information. He could still inspect the bastard himself, however. Herrick, bygone hero, knight, level 59, health, 107 out of 150, mana, 35 out of 55. A small smile grew on his lips when he realized all he had to do was bring this bygone hero to 1 HP, and he would consider it a victory.
I'm never giving up,
Jack said, and then rushed Lex's father. His opponent's bloodshot eyes opened wide before he dashed sideways to sidestep the blade coming down on his head. Jack was constantly surprised to see how fast this gray-haired old man moved. With a battle shout, Herrick spun around and connected the back of his fist into the back of Jack's head. It was a beautiful counter to a wild frontal attack. Jack -11, HP 4 out of 15. Jack dropped to his knees, his bell good and rung, but he was still inside the sparring area. A blur of movement caught his attention from his right, and he lifted his shield by instinct, catching the kick and deflecting it upward. Jack -2. HP 2 out of 15. Jack tried a counter of his own and used the moment his opponent was off balance to swipe his sword into Herrick's leg, and at the last moment, Jack activated his double strike. With 2 nasty slices in a row, Jack took off another 14 points of damage. Jack rolled to his feet and blasted the recovering old man with his red mining laser again. Herrick grunted and bashed Jack out of the ring again with his ability. Jack felt his arm bones shatter all the way up to his shoulder and ground his teeth for the 1 second it took for him to be restored to full as he passed outside the border of the ring. His opponent was still on fire, standing within the sparring yard, gritting his own yellowed teeth, waiting for him. It went out by the time Jack got back in, but he was making progress. Herrick, bygone hero, knight, level 59, health 83 out of 150, mana 25 out of 55. They continued to pound on each other for another 30 minutes, and Jack was thrown out of the ring many more times, but in the process, he had whittled Herrick down to a few remaining hit points. The other man was swaying as Jack pushed himself off the grass yet again. Finally, he was going to force Herrick out of the ring. He checked the time just to be sure. Being late for breakfast because he was trying to beat down Lex's father would... The ground fell out from under Jack for a moment when he realized what he was just about to do. The old and tired man before him looked terrified. He had expected Jack to just quit and walk away, but now it looked like Herrick would finally have to admit that he was the one that needed to stop. Something that Jack knew would do severe damage to Lex's father's already fragile mental state. He decided to do a complete 180 to what old Jack would have done. Before he stepped back into the ring, he sheathed his sword and bowed his head to Herrick.
Thank you for showing me what a true warrior can be, sir. The pounding you gave me was valuable.
He wasn't lying either. There were some counters and other tricks that Jack hoped he could hold on to and put to use in the tower. Lex's father seemed to deflate a little, but he said nothing. Jack could tell by the steady look in his normally wild eyes that there had been a slight change. The unusual silence from the man expressed a new respect, Or maybe it was just what Jack wanted to believe.
Thanks, Kron.
He said, turning to the horned-helmed giant of a man walking up. He held out his hand to Jack, giving him a curt nod of approval. Jack took the other man's hand and also took the opportunity to inspect him for the first time. Kron, Hero, Guardian, level 39. Captain of the Guard, Makeshift, 73% proficiency. Health, 925 out of 925. Mana, 500 out of 500. Relationship, disposition, approving. He wanted a peek at his gear, but Jack really didn't want to get caught looking. Inspecting still felt like an invasion of privacy to him. With nothing more to say, Jack waved to the rest of the guards and walked the long dirt road back to the inn to acquire his rest bonus with 10 minutes to spare.